on the issue of alcohol, cigarettes, and caffeine, according to the IM work, the cigarettes and the alcohol involve a lot of entities being brought into the body by the holes in the aura, which are part of the alcohol drinking and the cigarettes. This is not mentioned about caffeine. Also, on the list of foods, which they do list in the books, which you have to give up eventually to make the ascension, coffee and strong tea are the last.
Strong coffee.
Yeah, strong coffee and strong tea are the last on the list of things to give up. So I just wanted to point that out to you, that
it just makes me wonder whether some of the young people are using some of these other things for the same reasons that other people are using other things for, like coffee, whether the young people are using the cigarettes for the same kind of thing, and that they don't perhaps function as well without their cigarette here and there.
It's not the same thing, because the coffee is used as a medicine. And you take some people who are highly constipated and you muscle test them, for example, on your decaffeinated coffee, they muscle test extremely weak. You'll muscle test them on a fine bean, a fine organically grown coffee, a real one that is really blessed with Rex's permission, you know. And what happens here is this muscle test exceedingly strong. And it has nothing to do with prejudice. It has nothing to do with desire. It has nothing to do with mental manipulation. Some things make a person very, very strong. There are some foods that make a person very weak. When they take them internally, you should stay away from them. But some things make a person very strong. You have a person with asthmatic conditions, and if they have a cup of tea, which contains a little bit of theophylline, this will help them with their asthma. And they can get through the day without going to Ventolin or different types of steroids to help them with their problem. And yet you have your health nuts. They won't touch a cup of tea, but they'll take their Ventolin every time they have a little rasp in their chest. Now, this is wherein a little tea has its place for medicinal value. Now, even though all the good books say how tea is bad for you and how coffee is bad for you, we can go even further to say that fish is bad for you and cheese is bad for you and dairy products is bad for you. It depends on how far you want to go. Now, I think everyone is going to have to make some decisions for themselves as to how they are going to progress individually, that they can cope with life on a daily basis. But marijuana is certainly not going to help a person cope, because it dulls their mind where they can't think. Cigarettes do the same thing. It is actually a painkiller and relaxes the person so they can't cope properly. So you have these different problems here. Now, my counsel to you is, on the hard stuff and the hard drugs and the recreational drugs, put a stop to that. But don't make an issue and find out when it comes to coffee and tea. I have told you before, after I gave up coffee the first time, I burned for 4 days. I really burned and went through a whole lot of changes. But I still had signs of constipation. I take a little bit of coffee, and that solves the problem. And frankly, one of the things we should keep the colon open, and oftentimes learn to keep the mouth shut. And I think that's some of the best advice I've ever heard. Okay, sir?
Yeah, okay. It's just that, my comment is that some people might say that that's suppressing a symptom.
That's their problem.
Okay.
That's their problem. Because sometimes it may be suppressing a symptom, but what happens if the constipation continues for 7 or 8 days in a row?
Well,
and no matter what you do, you can't go.
Okay, well, some people would say that there's an underlying factor that needs to be
sure,
looked at.
There's an underlying factor. And what do you do in the meantime while you're trying to sort out the underlying factor, sir?
What do you do?
I take coffee.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Sure.
Good.
I just have another question.
And I'll recommend that they have a cup of coffee. Fair enough? All right. Now go ahead, sir.
Okay. just with regards to suppressing symptoms again, I'm just wondering how...
Let me go back to something, Brendan, if I may.
Sure.
Okay, Doug can take a look at my eyes now, and that huge autonomic nerve wreath, which was stuck clear out to the edge of the iris, is now in a very highly respectable and envious position to most people. Is that correct, Doug? You betcha. And if a little bit of coffee has helped me come to that position, long live the coffee bean. Now, if that's reactive, long live the reactions. But the thing is, we have to learn through a lot of long, hard experience to become discreet on one hand and discerning on the other in conducting our life in some way which will be valuable for us. Okay, sir.
Okay, next agenda, just about the marijuana and the duality involved with that. I come from a state in Australia where we have very liberal drug laws, and a lot of doctors are actually prescribing marijuana to their patients for cancer therapies and things like that. Now, I'm just wondering, and I've spoken with a few of these doctors on this matter, and I'm just wondering how, different people justify chemical prescription drugs which are altering the body's biochemical reactions to suppress a symptom, and I'm just wondering why, I suppose I'm just trying to say that other people look at marijuana as a natural therapy and use that natural therapy for the same reason, to perhaps suppress a symptom to lift that person up out of balance. So, I just feel that there's perhaps a little bit of duality there.
Did you read the material that I passed out to you, the dope on pot?
Sure.
Okay. Now, any doctor that reads that with an open mind and goes and tends to their research and researches into it would never be able to recommend marijuana as a cure for anything, or even as a symptom reducer, even as a pain reducer, because of the very harmful side effects it has on the individual, which you do not have the same with chemical-type drugs of painkillers.
Well, my experience has been that some of those doctors feel that you do have the same and, in fact, worse. So, I just thought that I'd bring that up.
I will gently say that any medical doctor or natural doctor that would justify themselves in the use of marijuana and other type of drugs like that are sadly mistaken, and will learn finally at a later time to simply that they had made some very severe mistakes in even recommending it to people.
Okay. Well, I respect your opinion, and just while we're on the subject of marijuana, I found that there's an article in this book, the highly respected Health Australasia magazine, and if I might just read it, it says, now just one more thing. Soon there will be a federal election. The plant, which was known as Indian hemp, marijuana in brackets, and more commonly known as pot, has many virtues. It could save our forests. I'll just cut in on this bit because a forest takes 80 years to regenerate and a marijuana plant takes 8 months. For its fibre is better for making paper than wood pulp. Its oil seeds have many uses, and it will grow almost any place without chemicals. We could plant a crop of this stuff whose narcotic value would be almost nil. So why not do it? Pressure from the logging industry, probably pressure from the tobacco industry, and I'll just cut in here, pressure from the prescription drug industries perhaps. Well, tobacco is good for nothing that I can think of, but smokers have to smoke, but not in public places, please. Not inside, anywhere, and not in cars or houses, where children may be exposed to the smoke. But let's make a crop out of Indian hemp, think of the overseas dollars it could bring in cloth, and the fibre it would make, not to mention the oil seeds. Let's take this up with our federal politicians, and this is happening in South Australia and New South Wales, to my knowledge at the moment, who want to be re-elected and completely stop the wood chip industry. The wood chippers wouldn't be out of a job. They could take up growing Indian hemp. And this is in the magazine that you recommend, so I just...
The Indian hemp has been used for years. During the Second World War, it was a very prominent source and a very excellent source of fiber with which they made rope. And in many, many places it grows just wild like a weed. This is no question about that. It grows rapidly, it grows anywhere. You can't get rid of it once you have it planted in a given area. But the THC which you find in that has detrimental effects upon the body from a psychological point of view and from a physiological point of view, and should not be encouraged to put on the skin in the use of these oils, even though it's very, very high in your, shall we say, your essential fatty acids. It should not be used under any circumstances because of its negative effect upon the human beings.
What about for clothing?
For clothing, no, I don't see any problem there because you're using the fiber of the hemp and you're not using the seed, you're not using the leaves of it, so to speak. But the thing is we have to have discernment here as to what is going to be good for people and what is not going to be good for people. Now, you have the people who want marijuana, and they want marijuana for their own use, and so they get on the green machine and start pushing hemp for this and that and the other thing, all of which is a good cause. But what's their underlying motivation behind the whole thing? To legalize marijuana. And that has very detrimental health factors that I have seen over the years in the iris of the eye. And I would not recommend it for 1 second or even encourage the consideration of it for 1 second.
Okay, well, look, thanks a lot for your views. It's helped clarify a lot of things for me. This letter is actually from the editor of this magazine.
That's fine. He's a very fine man,
yeah.
and he's probably very accurate in what he says.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I appreciate a good challenge.
There's a plant that's being developed, Indian hemp, that doesn't have the THC in it. It's been grown in Tasmania now. I know people in the Cabinet Office in Queensland that have a move going to get it grown out in the Darling Downs. They've gone to the stage now where they've got farmers ready to plant it.
With
now,
no
it
THC.
is not THC. It has no THC in it. And that is the plant that Maurice refers to in that magazine.
Thank you. That wasn't mentioned.
At an ashram in India, the Westerners were discussing how bad coffee was, and the spiritual master there said, well, if it helps you concentrate and focus in meditation, it's a good thing. And shortly after, they installed the coffee machine.
I don't know if people realise what the coffee was originally used for. It was originally used by the Arabs. I think it's probably the Sufis. And they use it for religious purposes, only on special occasions where they'd stay up all night chanting and drinking coffee and getting into a higher state.
It is truly a stimulant.
I think that the use of what I understand a synthetic drug in hospitals, which they claim to have effects similar to marijuana, but it is a synthetic product. And also I see that people in hospitals are considered like victims, and so it's like the last minute ditch to keep a hold on the people they can keep a hold on. So, that's how I understand it. So they're putting fluoride and tranquilizers, they're doing all these sort of things. And for the weaker people that are in that state where they can't, haven't got the energy to defend themselves, that's their way of keeping a hold on us. Trying to.
Yeah, I've come across people who choose to drink their marijuana as tea. And so sometimes I find it very difficult to argue with them. And I will assume at this stage that if you brew the marijuana to take it as tea, the THC will be released into the tea and you drink it, isn't it?
Doug, would you like to talk about your experience with, not with tea, but with your little...
I've never heard of anybody putting it into tea, but it's... Right, I've never heard anything about that, so I don't really know for sure, but I'll take people's word for it that it would be in the tea. I can attest from personal experience that it certainly makes its way into brownies.
would you like to share that, Doug? This is important. I think you ought to share this, Doug. Doug, I want Doug to share this because if the heat in taking and processing a tea would put that into a colloidal form that the body would absorb very quickly, if that would even be more potent than what Doug's going to talk about with his little marijuana brownies.
Well, I smoked pot intermittently from about the age of about 16 to 21. And on a couple of occasions, actually I think only just once, I did ate, pot brownies, where you put it into the brownie mix and whatnot and, cook brownies and eat them. And I remember I think I'd stopped smoking or consuming marijuana probably about roughly 3 years or so before I got on the program. And when I was on the program, the first, I think I'd been on the program about 3.5 years. So 3.5 years on a really, really heavy program, bunch of cranials and all the rest. And then so a total of about 6.5 years since I would have had any marijuana. And I was having my points held one day out in Maui, and all of a sudden in the middle of a point holding session, I burped up a cloud of pot smoke, where it was actually like you could smell it and you could see it. People could smell it across the room. And
you could cut it with a knife and serve it.
So it's just, I think it's important for people to realize that if you're looking at the lingering effects of marijuana, I think people are really fooling themselves if they think that it doesn't stay in the body for a really, really long time. And I was never really a very heavy smoker. I mean, I'd go months, or even in that phase of life when I did occasionally smoke it, I'd have chunks of a year or more where I didn't. I was never one of those like every day or every week kind of smokers. And even in that situation, you're talking a period of 6.5 years, and you're talking 3.5 years on a really, really heavy program. And then there I am burping up a cloud of pot smoke. So it makes you wonder, for a person who's a heavy pot smoker, and even if they've stopped, how long is that going to stay in their body if they're not on any kind of a program? I mean, if they're not on a program like this, how long is that going to stay in the body? I mean, perhaps pretty much forever, I would say.
About plants and marijuana, now we're talking about when we were taught herbalism at home, different parts of plants are used for different things, and there are some parts that are really poisonous. Marijuana, a long time ago when I was growing, was planted at home, but it was planted just for the, what name should I give to there's a secret society of, I don't know, witch doctors or, yeah, well, not a secret here. So they used to use it in a house. The room had no doors. It was made of bamboo all around, but there was no entrance. You couldn't see any entrance. And they used to use the marijuana more for rituals. And only special people grew it. And marijuana in itself was treated like a secret plant, and nobody was allowed to touch it except those who had something to do with it. And from the experiences that I have had, it is a very dangerous thing to play with.
I've been told that there was no THC content in the seeds or in the root, which are both medicinal.
Not according to the reports that I've had. You have the entire plant will have certain degrees of it, and yet there is a concentration in the seeds.
Mm-hmm. So if you apply the oil to the skin, the THC?
Detrimental.
Ah.
You take and muscle test anything that contains that oil from the marijuana, and you'll find that muscle test exceedingly weak.
From my knowledge, when you boil marijuana, the THC is only fat soluble, so it doesn't go into the water. And when it works with brownies, when I was making them at the time, they always said, I learned the best way to do it was to saute the marijuana in the butter. That way all the THC would go into the fat. So as far as tea, I don't really think the THC would stick into it.
It's that short-term memory loss.
I'd just like to make a really quick comment here. Let's muscle test pot. Are you going up? Are you going down? Let's look at this seriously, folks. For those of you who've done pot, you know where your head was at then. When you get off of it, you know where you're at now. And as far as coffee goes and helping a little bit of constipation, catnip works really good for that too.
I've tried it. Catnip, fennel, we've tried those. Doesn't work. But for those people, with catnip, it does relax you, but it doesn't make the colon work. Okay. You will find that there are many people who choose to be critical, especially of an instructor, because the instructor does his thing. I bring my coffee right out here openly in front of you. I make no bones about it. I do that oftentimes as a very extreme button-pushing attitude for people who are down on coffee. I will do also the same thing if a person is down on cheese. I'll make sure that cheese is served at mealtime. And I've had many people get so upset because I'll have a little piece of cheese, or they'll get so upset because I'll have a little piece of cooked food or a piece of fish. Okay, so be it. Now, I'm not going to criticize what you eat, but when you start criticizing me for what I eat, or challenging me, or finding fault with me, I pull my little booklet out of here, and I start looking for your name as one of the people that's on my list who I have hired properly. And if your name is on there, you're fired. If your name is not on there, then you're fired also. Okay? And I check out to find out where you are, because if I'm not paying you, then your evaluation of me is not worth anything because I haven't paid for it. Fair enough? Okay. And I hope that you take the same position aggressively toward anybody who starts challenging you for what you're doing. It's none of their business what they think about what you're doing. Is that clear? Okay, and sometimes you have to do that. You come on the offensive very strongly, and you put down the opposition, and you survive that way. If you sit back like a meek little lamb and don't take the aggressive hand in these areas, you'll find people stabbing you in the back every chance they get because you don't wear the right type of tennis shoes, you don't do the right thing with your hair, you don't do the right thing with your food, you don't do the right thing with your sleeping habits. And frankly, folks, I'll tell you this very carefully and very nicely, it's none of your damn business what I do with my life. And I respect yours accordingly. Okay? That's simple enough? How's that for a reaction, Brendan? Does that help? All right. You'll get a good rise out of me. Now, if somebody's 25 minutes late, and I tell them very pointedly to get here on time, and they say, you got a little resistance to that, I mark them off my little sheet in my mind, and say, here's a person that has no respect for authority, no respect for classroom decorum, and no respect for other people. Now, if you follow what I'm saying? And so I get on the aggression on that end too. Now go ahead, Doug.
I'll pick that one.
We have a redundant type situation here.
You sure it's not in your papers?
Absolutely, unless you put it there.
Well, it might, because a lot of papers.
Anita,
This is the only paper I got.
Okay. Has anyone taken the certificate list from the desk up here last night? Because I can't find it. Yeah.
You got it?
Okay. On this whole issue of do's and don'ts, what's that? I think one of the things to consider in all of this is that every last one of us is going to draw the line in a different place. We're all gonna draw the line in a slightly different place as to what we can, like, yes, we're willing to do this, but no, we're not willing to do that. we're all going to have our differences of opinion there, and a lot of the gray areas in between. And that's fine. I mean, it's as John's always said, everybody's got the right to their own opinion, and everybody's got the right to take their stand and follow their own conscience in all areas, really. Bottom line here is, John's the instructor. He's teaching the seminars, and he wants to work with people that are willing to play the game in a certain fashion. And so the bottom line is, if you're willing to play the game that way, then come along with John and get on with it. And if you're not, then go find somebody else whose rules you like a little better. I mean, that's kind of the way I look at it. And rather than contend and criticize over where any one individual has drawn the lines, if you don't like those lines, go find somebody else whose lines you like a little bit better. And you probably everyone will be happier for it. So that's the way I would look at the whole thing there. Fair enough? Bob?
While we're pushing buttons. There's a conversation I was having with Jenny this morning about how we react to different situations, and most of us have the opportunity to walk past the mess that's out the front here in the morning. And I said to Jenny, what's your first reaction when you see the cups and the boxes and the stuff? Do you blame, or do you judge, or do you feel that maybe we should do a bit more? And we looked at each other and had a bit of a chuckle, and I thought, well, I really must admit that I haven't given up my addiction to judgment just yet. But it's quite easy to see where everyone else is wrong. And sometimes it's nice to be able to feel that we contribute. So you tend to develop a habit of trying to pick up someone else's stuff as well. So if we all contribute a bit more than we take out, theoretically we all win. So I meter this out little bit by little bit, and hopefully by this time next year I'll be big enough to pick up more cups than I do right now. But when it comes to the point of what you eat, I personally don't mind. Some people can get an easy trip and some people have got to work harder. I'm in the latter category where I really have to study a bit harder because I don't consider that I can learn as quick as some of these guys that pick it up real easy. So I spend a bit more time, and as far as what I'm eating and drinking, I'd like to think that if it's not really doing me much good, it's not much point. I'm wasting my time eating it because I'm coming from a fair long history of not being too well. So I spent 50 years getting into a real bad shape. I figure I've only got about another 30 or 40 to get half tidy. So I figure that it's not an argument. I don't really have a problem with what you eat or what you drink. But if I've got to put 2 or 3 litres of pure water into my body a day, I've got to drink a bit of carrot juice. And if I want to have the Oxymag, I need to drink some citrus juice as well. There's a limit to just how many litres of fluid I can put into the body. So these other items are not even a consideration. I don't have the capacity to be worried about your alcohol and your coffees and your teas. And it's just not an issue. So maybe I just have to work a bit harder than you guys.
Okay, there was a...
I have one item that does need discussion. I want to talk about a principle here. Where's Anita? Tell her to get back up here. We do have people who have their glitches about certain types of people and certain habit patterns, and well, she can do that. Now, one thing that I find, and I don't know how to say this delicately, so I'll just say it the way it is. Let's say a person is Jewish in their religious background, and somebody who is very, very death on Jews comes up to that person and says, I want nothing to do with you because of what you and your people have done. And I want nothing to do with you. You have the wrong type of energies, and I don't want you holding my points. I don't want you in my space, and I don't even want to talk to you ever again. And I kind of find it difficult on how to handle that because I have been confronted with that. I've had people where I have worked in Chicago, I have worked with the black people. And then I have people coming over because they want to get involved in body electronics. And I'll be working with a black Muslim group. And we're fine friends because we've helped a lot of black Muslims get their health back. And then suddenly you have a white group, which we'll call a white supremacy group, who believe that any black person does not have a soul. And they are very open about that, if you've ever found these people. And here I'm working with black people, and they say, I will not have anything to do with you as long as you continue to have anything to do with these black people. Well, I had very, very good results on working with black people. I found them to be beautiful people. And I worked with a black chiropractor in a black chiropractor's office, and 90% of my people that I worked with for about a year and a half were black. Now that's kind of in an interesting situation. And the white people would invite me then up to their white supremacy organizations where they would not allow anybody with any tainted skin at all, according to their wording. Any black-skinned person was not welcome there. And I'd work with them with the same degree of impartiality as I'd work with the people down in South Chicago. Are you hearing me? And I remember one time I stood up in front of about 500 people that I was addressing, and this fellow who gave me the introduction gave me a very glowing introduction. And this was a white supremacy group that hated Jews and they hated blacks. And I said in front of this group of 500 people, I said, you know, with that introduction like that, my Jewish grandfather would roll over in his grave. And that bothered them. They looked at me, and I looked back at them, and I continued on with my lecture. Pardon? Heaven's sakes, I have no idea if I have a Jewish grandfather. I have everything in me from soup to nuts according to my genealogical record, and I probably can claim every race somewhere along the line. But the thing is this I said, and I wanted to get their reaction. And boy, did I get a cold reaction at that point of time. And I stirred them up. And all of a sudden, in a couple of national Jewish, anti-Jewish organizations, they labeled me as a Jew, you know, and tried to defame me all over the doggone place. And the man that did it, after he put out this big newspaper about me, he died the next day. I don't get revenge. Now, just a matter of fact that happened. I looked at that and it says, boy, I'll tell you what, you can joke with a group of people and they sometimes take it seriously. But anyway, so I was blasphemed in this one letter that came out of Phoenix. I forget the name of it now. But it went to all the right-wing type organization all over the United States, and I had some nice reactions from that for a while. But I'll tell you what, here in this group, I have people coming to me who have been told by other people that they want nothing to do with them because of how their energies are, because of their attitudes, because of how they conduct themselves. Now, I'd like to have Anita prepare herself now to give you a small quote that she showed me this morning, which will help to solve this particular problem. Is everybody here? And I want you to pay very close attention to this and get rid of your bigotry, if at all possible. And get rid of your reactive mechanisms, which are racist, if at all possible. And start taking a look at the human family of which we are all a part. Anita.
Lord Buddha was once asked why a man should love all persons equally. Quote, Lord Buddha was once asked why a man should love all persons equally. This is, quote, because, the great teacher replied, in the numerous and varied lifespans of each man, every other being, at one time or another, and in one form or another, animal or human, has been dear to him. End of quote.
And so, if a person is of your own bloodline, we have a lot of bigotry when it comes to bloodline. And if you're bloodline, then I'll love you. If you're not bloodline, then you're over there in the other camp. When can we let go of this kind of garbage? When we realize that next lifetime you might be in the other camp. We've all been red, we've all been white, we've all been black, we've all been whatever other colors there are, yellow. Now, I want you all to know that. And some of you women that still have this feeling of superiority, just remember, if you keep that up, you'll be a man in your next life. Consider that as a joke. But nevertheless, let's not drive our stakes so deep that we will have nothing to do with certain people because of the energy that they put out, which is their unique energy that is part of their training, part of their culture, part of their life system, and so on. You're going to run across folks, all shapes and sizes, and if you can't get along here, you're certainly not going to get along out in society. So, Anita, thank you very much. Every day, Anita comes up to me very lovingly and says, here's something that'll answer this question. And she'll give me a quote from one of her many books she has over there. And she's always just right on, very quietly, bending my mind.
Okay, another principle I think that ties in with a lot of what we've been speaking about this morning involves the whole concept of an individual being able to accept correction. And this is a pretty big glitch for most of us, probably pretty much all of us. John talked yesterday about the pattern of wanting to control, or the pattern of wanting to be controlled, as being a very central pattern for many people, where you'll have certain people that will have word patterns of I desire to control, or I have to control, or I can't control, and others that will be in the sort of the other end of the spectrum of wanting to be controlled, or having to be controlled, or not being able to be controlled. And there's a lot of different reactive patterns in there. I mean, most people, for example, just take the word pattern. Just everyone here for a moment, just take the word pattern. Don't tell me what to do, and just kind of repeat it a few times and see what kind of charge you get. Anybody here?
Say it again, Doug.
Don't tell me what to do. Anybody there? Ring a bell there. Anybody? And this is a pattern that I think is pretty deeply ingrained in all of us. We come into life in the body of an infant, where obviously we're not capable of taking care of ourselves. And very few of us are going to be capable of taking care of ourselves for at least the first 10 or 15 years of our life. A lot longer than that in most cases. But obviously most of us are going to be in a situation where somebody is going to be taking care of us and somebody is going to be telling us what to do. And so a lot of us have a tremendous amount of rebellion about that. We have a lot of resistance to people telling us what to do and telling us what not to do. Some of us don't like to be told when it's time to go to bed, Megan. Of course, some of the grown-ups don't like to be told when it's time to class, and a lot of people don't like to hear that bell being rung. So there's a lot of patterns that are still there, and it's one of the things that's really, really obvious. When you're as an instructor just watching a class, it's one of the things where you can see this very, very clearly is just something as simple as, do people show up on time in class? Because obviously. And this is, Gary's always back there right on time and everything, so Gary can kind of gets a nice position and watching the different people file in. And I'm sure you've noticed a few patterns there, Gary. You know, and I think it's pretty obvious to all of us that is, you know, on an issue as simple as just being on class on time, with very few exceptions, it's pretty much always the same people that are here on time, and it's always the same people that aren't here on time. I mean, I know there's exceptions. Every now and again, a person that's on time 99% of the time gets, you know, something comes up and they don't make it. But bottom line is most of us are being very, very true to our patterns here. And I just want to really examine this whole concept of taking correction. What does it say about an individual when they're incapable of taking correction from another person? What position is that individual putting themselves in? Anyone? Okay, not wanting to be controlled is a big part of it. The thing to realize is we're all works in progress. I think we probably could agree to that. You know, we're all in a state of hopefully a state of growth, but we're certainly all in a state of change here. And when we take the position in our own mind that nobody's going to tell us what to do, nobody's going to control us, nobody's going to correct us, nobody's going to tell us that we've done anything wrong, then we're setting a very, very dangerous precedent for ourselves, because we're taking the position in our own mind, basically, that we have nothing to learn from anybody else, that we have nothing to learn from the people around us. And the thing to realize is that ultimately every one of us is a teacher for every other person. Every one of us here probably has at least one or two things that would benefit virtually everybody else. And when we take that position that we won't accept the correction from other people, we really shut ourselves off from a lot of the learning experiences that could be ours otherwise. Now, in times past, because this has Peter? Okay. In times past, if you go back historically, we've had a situation that's been very, very common of a teacher-student relationship. Some would call it a guru. You know, it depends on your cultural biases, but for many, many people, there has been a situation of apprenticeship in some way, or a situation of where an individual would, by their own free will, such as it is, they would place themselves under the guidance of another individual, where the idea would be not to create a dependency relationship ultimately, but to create a situation where the individual has another individual out there that they feel they can trust, and where they can believe that other individual has their highest and best good, shall we say, as a main concern, and then they're willing to accept correction from the other person. And this is this really ties in with the whole concept of obedience, where both Anita and John have put forth the idea that the first law of heaven is the law of obedience. Well, no, I'm just saying that you've covered it here. Okay, consider this statement: all blessings are predicated upon obedience to law. All blessings are predicated upon or based upon obedience to law. In other words, there's laws out there, and there's consequences whether you obey or disobey a particular law. You obey the law, there's a certain blessing that's yours. I might add there is one exception, which I'm not going to get into right now, but there's also a concept of willingness to obey a law. Because in some circumstances, one is perfectly willing to obey a certain law, and yet the situation or opportunity may never arise for you to obey that law. So you can put that one in the back burner as well. But basically, either obedience or willing to be obedient to a law, that's what blessings are based upon.
So there's no confusion here in respect to what Doug has said, that there is a time where if you had the opportunity, you would obey the law that you were aware of. But as Doug said, oftentimes that opportunity never arises. But because of the intent of the heart, the person will receive that blessing as if they had obeyed the law in the flesh, because their mind was aligned with the universal laws, which if they had the opportunity, they would have obeyed that law. And so the blessings are theirs because of their obedience, at least on the mental and emotional level.
For example, you might be perfectly willing to lay down your life for another individual, and yet, for whatever reason, that situation might never arise. And yet, if you are truly dedicated to that principle and you are truly willing to do it, you would still have that blessing, whether or not you ever actually had the situation of being, called upon to be willing to lay down your life to protect another. At any rate, we have this concept then that blessings are predicated upon obedience, or at least willingness to be obedient to a certain law. And it's for this reason then that obedience is the first law of heaven. Because what this principle is ultimately saying is that all laws hinge upon the principle of obedience.
When you exercise faith, which we have discussed already in the first week, and you exercise faith properly, you come to virtue, which is faithfully complying with the law. That's where you are obedient to a certain law. And out of that obedience to that law, which we will call virtue, you come to a knowledge of that law through experience that you can gain no other way but through the experience of obedience to that law.
Now, we have on the one hand a principle of the, shall we say, the apprenticeship, or the teacher-student situation, where one is voluntarily subjecting oneself to another individual. In other words, where one will accept correction from this other individual. This is really a stage ultimately in both individual as well as collective evolution. That's a stage, because ultimately what we all need to become obedient to and what we all need to voluntarily subject ourselves to is correct principle. I mean, in other words, ultimately the role of the guru or the role of the teacher is not to govern your life, it's to teach you those principles that you will ultimately then put yourself in obedience to.
I'm reminded we had Mari and David Parker, who were here last year, and some of you will remember how David said, when he first started learning to become one of the world's finest tenors, he went to this one teacher, and the first thing the teacher says to him, he says, the first thing you have to accept that as far as you are concerned, I am God. And you don't question me. You do exactly what I ask you to do, or else you are no longer my student. And if you do exactly what I ask you to do, then I will make a singer out of you, which he did. But he first of all had to totally accept the fact that for him, as an apprentice to the master, he had to accept that for him, then that master, as far as he was concerned, was his God for that period of time that he was under his direction and domain. Now that's the type of attitude that you have to take if you want to learn to play the violin or learn how to build a house or learn how to be a good vegetable farmer. The same principle applies. If you go to that teacher, then you listen to what that teacher has to say. If you're going to be disobedient to everything he says, you have no business being there in the first place. And frankly, a good teacher in this situation would kick you out long ago.
Yeah, I just want to remind you of the story of Babaji, who was up in the Himalayas. I told this story the first week where the disciple came up this huge mountain to see him. And if you remember, he said to him, I have to study with you. I just have to study with you. And or else, I'll or I'll throw myself over the side of the cliff. And so Babaji just looked at him and said, all right, go ahead. And the disciple threw himself over the side of the cliff. And, of course, Babaji then told the other disciples there to go and pick up the body that was all dead and beaten up from falling down the whole cliff. And he put his hand on the body and he brought him back to life. But this is the obedience that this disciple had, and then Babaji accepted him right away. But he said right after that, you are now capable of becoming my student because you have fulfilled the first law of heaven, which is the law of obedience.
I think what I would perceive is that there's a gradient here where ultimately each individual will hopefully evolve to a position where they can stand on principle themselves, where they will be by their own choice totally dedicated to obedience to law. They will be in perfect accord with the right action by choice on a moment-to-moment basis. Virtually no one is in that position overnight. Really, no one is. There's a long gradient to get there, and that gradient is going to involve first a certain amount of experience where one is willing to be obedient to another individual. This will include one's parents when one's growing up. This could include one's teachers in school, one's coaches in sports, and any of other, and all sorts of other figures that will be in your life at different places and different times. The observation that I would make is that an individual who consistently rebels against all authority, an individual who consistently rebels against any external influence, whether it be a parent or a teacher or a coach or any type of authority figure, they're in a position reactively where they refuse to be controlled, they refuse to be obedient, they refuse to allow anybody else to tell them what to do. If that's the mindset, what position has that individual really put themselves in with respect to being controlled? They're a total slave, actually. They're totally in control as a result of their resistance to being controlled. Do y'all follow? I mean, like, for example, take a child that will, suppose you have a child that will basically do the exact opposite of whatever you tell him to do, right? How hard is it to control that child? I mean, if you know they're going to do the exact opposite of whatever you tell them to do, what do you tell them to do? Exact opposite of what you want them to do.
I'm just a little confused, Anita. You mentioned that the guy threw himself off the cliff to be obedient, but isn't suicide supposed to be a big no-no? I mean, I've always been taught suicide is,
I believe that this disciple had the faith that this teacher had the knowledge that he required, and he had the faith to do that. See, he was so convinced that this teacher was the teacher for him, this guru was for him, that he would obey him to the utmost, and he knew that this teacher would not make that statement without coming from a higher realization.
You already did.
If anyone needs that information, Ken has got it on a sheet of paper. Okay. One of my teachers 25 years ago, he said to me just in passing, it was just like a one-liner, and I've thought about it a lot. especially over the last 6 weeks. He said there's 3 ways that I can learn from people. He said I can learn with people, without people, or in spite of people. Okay, so, you know, over the years, I've gravitated in all of these 3 areas. I've sort of fluctuated. And like here in this area, in spite of people, that's what Doug's just talking about now, like being the renegade, the maverick, as John calls it, where, you know, saying, don't tell me what to do, and I end up being a slave because I want so much to be free that I enslave myself. Then, in this area here, without people, it's like it's a slow way to do things. A lot can be done without people. Like Jesus went and meditated, and a lot of the great masters have spent a lot of times on their own in solitude. With people,
only after they'd spent a lot of time with people and
sure.
were perfectly well prepared for that next
sure.
step.
Sure, exactly. Yeah, that's my point. And it's like with people is a way that I thought, you know, was the way for me. And it's like, to use the old learning to play the violin trick, if I want to learn to play the violin, I'm not one of those people who can just pick it up and play it, although there are people who can do that with instruments that I know. But for me, I need to go to a teacher, and I need to learn the scales and how to make a sound from it. And I do it with people. From that point on, I found like it's like indicator lines in the iris of the eye. You know, my pen is not real great, but you know what I'm getting at. Like, there's this axis sort of thing. Now, I don't always gravitate to here because I fluctuate wildly. But it's like if I want to be the greatest violinist in the world, at some point I need to break away from my teacher to uncover my own passion, my own style, my own unique way of playing. And but, you know, I need to start, as Doug says, with people, learning principles. So it's like, if you can imagine this now, 3-dimensional, it makes a tetrahedron, is it? What is it? 3-sided tetrahedron, yeah. So that's like, it becomes 3-dimensional instead of like this linear thing that I've done all my life, being the maverick, then doing things without people, and then doing things with people, like saying, tell me what to do, tell me what to do. Don't tell me what to do, don't tell me what to do. Leave me alone, leave me alone. And they're the word patterns from these 3 areas. So hopefully one day my pivot point will remain right here.
Thank you.
Those individuals that are able to just pick up a violin and play it will be fairly rare, but they will also be people that in some other life, whether on a soul level or genetically, have already mastered that. I mean, I knew, for example, when I was growing up, one of my friends in high school had a little sister that was giving concerts with the Boston Symphony Orchestra on the piano when she was about 4. So there are certainly situations where people can just do these things innately, but I would say that they've probably already passed the test in another life, so it's really not even an exception. I agree with Peter.
Excuse me. Some of you still have an honest, sincere doubt as to the possibility of other lives, or the preparation that we have in this life that may have taken many, many lives to perfect before we even got here, to play the violin or to play a musical instrument or have some sort of a talent. I want to share with you again one specific thing that I had the experience when I was in Washington, D.C. We had a man that he looked very, very crude and much like what I would call a gorilla. He had a withered right arm. And he went through a healing crisis on his body where his entire facial structure went through an absolute change where you would not recognize him to be the same person. You'd know he was the same person, but the facial features changed dramatically. And he went through a healing on his withered right arm that was born that way from birth, when he went through and re-experienced an apartment house fire back in Paris, when he was a concert pianist during the time of Chopin. And that night, during the day, his arm was totally restored to full normal function, but along with that was an entire memory restoration of his past life as a concert pianist, with full memory of everything that he had ever played in that lifetime. And he gave us a concert that night on Chopin, having never in this lifetime played one note. But he had both arms restored to full normal function. All the withered arm from birth was completely gone and completely restored, and his memory had restored. I looked at that, and I've run across that several times since then, where people have had memories of things given to them from past lives, to where they became very good at things in this lifetime, having had no training in this life. We have lived before. Now, even though you may not have that under your belt experientially, put it on the shelf and leave it open, so after maybe 5 or 10 years from now, you will have an experience that will be absolutely phenomenal for you, with the correction of different parts of your body or your mind, where you'll have this particular experiential understanding, to where you know that you are an immortal being and you are in a transient body at this point of time. So just please consider that.
In regard to principles and being obedient to certain principles, I know when I first got on the spiritual path, when I heard certain principles, they were very, very, very hard for me. Or unacceptable, yes. And you might I might say I was rebellious in certain areas. And what I did was I made it okay if there was a certain principle that I couldn't understand at the time, or I couldn't do at the time. First of all, I made it okay that I couldn't do that particular principle at that time. And then, and I think this is important, because I think there's a lot of people in the room that are hearing a principle and they're just like, saying, okay, well that's not for me, and I don't want to deal with this, and I think we should just forget about that. But what I did was I made it okay that I couldn't do that principle at the moment. And then I prayed to open my awareness that I may understand the principle to a greater extent. Now, some of these principles I prayed on for years, not just like a couple of weeks. I prayed on some of them for years and years, and some of them I still haven't gotten answers on. But the ones I have, I feel that when I do it now, it's my truth, because I have prayed on it and I have gotten the answer. It's not just some guru has told me, okay, blah, 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 you have to do this. But when it becomes your truth, you truly understand it from your own prayers, your own asking about it, from your own readings and from your own experiences. It becomes more your own, and you can do it so freely. And then the other thing I found, that as I was true to the principles I could be true to, some of the other ones that I found hard with became much easier. They seemed to bring me upscale by being true to the other ones. I was brought upscale to find the other principles that I was having a very hard time with became very easy to be true to. So I just wanted to let you know that if people are out there struggling with this concept.
You want to save this for tomorrow? Okay, I think we're going to get into this a little bit more tomorrow. One thing I will just say in passing is that if we look upon this from one perspective, a person's not truly ready to stand on their own in accordance with principles until they've first been willing to go through the stage of being a good student. because you can't possibly become a good teacher without being a good student first. That's something I want you all to think about a little bit. And just consider this. There's an awful lot of principles out there to consider. There's no shortage of books on the subject. There's 1,000,001 spiritual principles out there. And if an individual is in the position where they consistently refuse to take correction from anybody else, and they simply want to just immediately try to stand on principle, I can guarantee you that every last one of us who tries to do that will have no trouble whatsoever finding some principle that in our own mind will justify us doing exactly what we want to do reactively. So just think about that. I mean, in other words, it's absolutely no trouble to do what you want to do and come up with a very, very plausible, spiritually sounding principle that will justify it. And that's the trap there.
I do have one thing to say before we close this issue that Doug will be handling tomorrow. The attitudes with cranial that we get into oftentimes expose some of our greatest weaknesses that I have urged all of you to watch very carefully, that we don't get caught up in these word patterns, such as you awake? Okay. Such as, I never could do what I want to do. We get caught up in these word patterns. I can't trust anybody because I can't do what I want to do, and everyone's bossing me around, everyone's telling me what to do, and so on and so forth. This is in the control issue that we're bringing up, trying to make people aware of it, but some people don't understand that that's not for everybody else. It's for the individual, us individually, who come up against these control issues the moment that we have some cranial work done. We've seen that happen. These things come out and we identify with them. We identify with that word pattern, and if we allow ourselves to identify with that word pattern, that I'm not going to be controlled, I'm not going to be told what to do, I've been controlled all my life, everyone's told me what to do, I don't like it, I don't want any part of it, and before you know it, they pack their bags and they're gone. Now we find people who do this on a regular basis, that they don't have the discipline of mind, and they haven't listened to the forewarnings that I have given, or Doug has given, or Anita has given, pertaining to these things. So when they come up against these highly reactive mechanisms, they act on the reaction rather than discipline themselves to continue on, to the end of the class to get the material that they need to help them to work through that particular healing crisis. Now, granted, there will be healing crises, and some of you have been through some pretty severe ones. That's the way it is. But don't get lost in the word patterns that come up when the point holding brings these things up for your appraisal. I've warned you about this, and I see it happening over and over again. And right at this time, it's a very precarious time, because some of you are very angry, and you're going through a lot of anger and upset, and you're shielding it very well, and I appreciate that. Some of you are going through a whole lot of discontent, where this is the last place on earth you want to be right now, and you wish you were to go to home and this party gone to hell, and that's the attitude which some of you have. Stay right with it, because I understand these feelings that you're going to be having. I'm understanding these feelings that you're going to be having right during or after a cranial. They're going to be vicious and strong and almost overwhelming at times. But keep your commitments and stay right with it, and work through the cranials, and don't allow yourselves to not complete it. Now, the problem that we have here is, even after the cranials are completed, the mouth and consciousness of the individual goes through a rupture for the next couple of months, and maybe longer. Would rupture be a strong enough word?
Sounds right.
That's about right. You can have a very, very strenuous rupturing of the mind and the body and the emotions, because once you get these things turned on, they don't turn off very easily, and you go through things about yourself that you just do not understand and cannot comprehend and don't want to have anything to do with. We've had people wandering around, if you remember, people wandering around after a very definite cranial for 6 months, wondering who they are and where they are coming from, examining their motivations or lack of motivation until they can find out that, now here's what I want to do and here's where I'm going, and they go back to the list and they begin their course of action. But usually it's in a completely different direction than where they've been before, and that's fair enough, because now they're in control of their life, doing what they want to do, rather than being shuffled around by reactive patterns that have controlled them for lifetimes. Now, I hope I make this very clear. Now, if somebody does get in a very disruptive mode, try to calm them down a bit, because this too shall pass. But you're going to have a tremendous amount of emotions coming out after the cranial is over, and please don't take them personally. Look at them and realize this is all part of the process, and don't just act on it when these overwhelming feelings of emotion are coming over you. We have people in grief with memories of the past. We have people in fear that want to get out of here as fast as they can. We have people in anger that are all upset because of things that have happened to them that they are now aware of. We have people who are in apathy because they can't do anything about it. And we have all of this going on here. And some of these things are almost devastating to the individual with these emotions. Try to control these emotions. Continue to experience them until you have them under control. Because if you allow these emotions to get out of control, you can do something foolish that might be very, shall I use the word, you'll take a while to live these things down. I have warned you repeatedly about a cranial, on how the cranials will bring out your greatest glitches and magnify them maybe 10,000 times. And so some of these things will come out for you to have a good look at, that you can swallow hard and say, I now understand. And if a person does act a little foolish occasionally, which some people are doing, then just chalk it up to experience, not be judgmental about it, and realize that they're taking a good look at what they're doing too, which is still out of control, which they now have a chance to look at and get under control. Now that's important business. Now, we have some other important business. Anita, are you ready? Okay. Many of you are aware of the 5 rights. Now, Anita would like to take the time to reorganize things up front here, I think, a bit. How do you want it, hon?
You get a massage table.
Yeah, I'm going to have to put the table in front, but wait, we'll do the spin, I think, in the front. Before we do the 5 rights, the physical form, we have given this out to you. I think it was in the cranial class. It's called A Fountain of Youth. And I just want to read.
This has nothing to do with urine therapy.
Yeah, we're switching gears here a little bit. This is for all the people that want to look young and lovely and beautiful and maintain that young, supple, beautiful look. Anyway, I'm just going to read this one section here, so in case you haven't read this yet, you can understand why we do the 5 rights. The first important thing I was taught after entering the monastery was this. The body has 7 energy centers, which in English could be called vortexes. The Hindus call them chakras. They are powerful electrical fields, invisible to the eye, but quite real nevertheless. Each of these 7 vortexes centers on one of the 7 ductless glands in the body's endocrine system, and it functions in stimulating the gland's hormonal output. It is these hormones which regulate all of the body's functions, including the process of aging. The lowest, or first vortex, centers on the reproductive glands. The second vortex centers on the pancreas in the abdominal region. The third centers on the adrenal gland in the solar plexus region. The fourth vortex centers on the thymus gland in the chest or heart region. The fifth centers on the thyroid gland in the neck. The sixth centers on the pineal gland at the rear base of the brain. And the seventh, highest vortex, centers on the pituitary gland at the forward base of the brain. In a healthy body, each of these vortexes revolves at great speed, permitting vital life energy, also called prana, or etheric energy, to flow upward through the endocrine system. But if one or more of these vortexes begins to slow down, the flow of vital life energy is inhibited or blocked, and well, that's just another name for aging or ill health. These spinning vortexes extend outward from the flesh in a healthy individual, but in the old, weak, and sickly, they hardly reach the surface. The quickest way to regain youth, health, and vitality is to start these energy centers spinning normally again. There are 5 simple exercises that will accomplish this. Any one of them alone is helpful, but all 5 are required to get best results. These 5 exercises are not really exercises at all. The lamas call them rites, and so that is how I shall refer to them. Now, when I was in India with John, and we became deathly ill with this virus that attacked the red blood cells, I felt that I had to do something because both of us were laying in bed. We're in a strange country. And one of us had to be strong enough at least to carry the suitcases to the plane because we had 21 legs on our trip. And we had different flights. Every 3 days, we had to get on the plane and go here and go there, and we had conferences and everything. And in between this, we were laying in bed and having diarrhea and vomiting. But I felt like one of us had to get our energy up, so I did. So besides taking a lot of herbs and oxygen and Schweitzer and everything else on the program, I did pull myself out of bed. And I started to do these 5 rites, which we're going to be showing now here in class. And I was just amazed how well I became from doing the rites, even though I had to take like every single ounce of energy to do them. I mean, I just struggled. I pushed myself out of bed to do it. It was just amazing how much energy they actually gave me. And one person wanted to know about these rites one day, and I was instructing them in the diet, and they said they really wanted to do these exercises. And so I gave them a copy of this booklet, and I really warned them, and I said to them, please, when you go home, do not do them the full amount of time, the 21 times that it tells you to do it. I said, please go home, do them maybe 1, 2, 3 times each form, just do it maybe 3 times. And the person didn't listen to me. They just went and they did it 21 times. And this man, he started vomiting and diarrhea all over the place. And he called me up the next morning. He said, Anita, you were right. Now I understand how powerful these exercises are. But they are because they work on the chakra spin. And as it said in the article here, if the spin has stopped or slowed down, you're going to have a problem in that area, and there's not going to be the energy flow through the endocrine system. So this is what the exercises do. They get that spin to go at the speed that's necessary. In here, they talk about the whirling dervishes who do the spins over and over and over and over again. And it says in here that they actually overload the chakras by doing it that much. And they suggest in the book that you only do it up to 21 times maximum. They say to start very, very slow, maybe 3 times on each exercise the first time. Do that for a week. And then the next week maybe increase it to 4. Next week increase it to 5, 6, 7 each week until you get up to 21. Also, you'll find that certain people will have a hard time doing one or another of the exercises. Like you might be able to do 1, 2, 3, and 4 is like tremendously hard for you. Well, what's suggested in that case is that you could either leave the exercise out and do the other ones, or what I have done is I have brought the exercise to the simplest of form. And just like, for instance, if there's one here where you're laying on your back and you have to pick your legs up. Okay, if you can't pick your legs up, if your body is that weak where the person cannot pick their legs up, I've tried just picking one leg up at a time. Just to, or if you can't even, if the person is so weak that they can't even, you could just pick it up maybe just a little bit. You could take the form to a very simplified form till you can actually do the correct form. And you will be surprised that from day to day, you just keep getting better and better and better and better. The consistency of it just makes you get better with it every single day. It's good to do it every day. It's good to do them in sequence also. I know certain people like certain ones more than the other ones, but it's good, according to the book, to do it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's also a 6th exercise in the book, which we're not going to perform here, but I just want you to be aware of it. It is there for people who want to go into celibacy and who want to channel the sexual energy up into the higher chakras. It cautions you in the book not to do that exercise until you commit to that. If you haven't committed to celibacy at this time, then just do the 5. So we're going to have now some demonstrations. And the first exercise is the spin, who I'm going to have Matthew demonstrate. Is he still here or did he leave? Oh, Matthew. Yeah. I think there's enough room here to do it in the front. As he's coming up, initially when you do the spin, your hands are out to the side, and do you do it with both down or one up and one down? Okay. What is that, Brooke? Okay, right down, left up.
When John taught these about 10 years ago, he said to do it that way, where you'd have your left hand with the palm up like this, because that would be your receiving side, and then your right hand palm down, because that would be your giving side. I don't believe the book actually covers that. I think in the book they show them both down.
But on the diagram you can see it. It looks like he's got the left one up on the if you look on the diagram, which is in your pack, in your cranial pack. It actually looks like he's got it up. Okay. And the other thing is with the spotting, when you first do this one, you may find that you're very, very dizzy. And in the book it says to stop if you're getting extremely dizzy. And the other thing you can do to stop the dizziness is to spot, like a dancer. Like if I look at that wall there, and as I turn, I hold my head until I can see it again. Eventually, you should get to the point where you can look all around like this and spin.
Eventually, you basically work through all the dizziness and you can
Right.
do it. But sometimes you got to spot, as you're saying, to
Right. Yes. In the beginning, you'll spot, looking that way, holding it, and whipping around until you can get through that dizziness section. But then later on, you just keep looking around like that with your head.
Anita, I have an
you do?
alternate version of
What's your version?
yeah. If you look at your left palm as you go around, you're focusing on something that is stationary relative to you, as opposed to the room or whatever whizzing by, and that helps to alleviate the dizziness too.
Okay. But eventually, I believe you should work through the dizziness. Yeah. And then just whip around the room.
Yeah, initially when the dizziness is there, it can have a lot to do with entities. It's not only the Sufis and the Lamas that do this, like things like Australian Aboriginals used to do it with their bull roarers and things like that. It's quite common. And what happens is it's the entities that are getting disoriented, and they do not like to stay in a body spinning like that, right? And they vamoose.
They get dizzy.
They get out. They don't like that feeling, and so this is a really good way. And that eventually you don't have the dizziness anymore.
So this is kind of the spin cycle for entities. It just kind of...
Just before I came here, Anita, one of the lamas was in Stockholm in Sweden, Tara Rinpoche, and I didn't hear it directly from him, but second-hand, that the vibrations had actually changed and that the numbers of the spins were now 33 and not 21. Have you heard anything about that?
I haven't heard that, but have you... Right. They just say not to overstimulate. If you're going into really high numbers, then you're going into overload. Okay, so Matthew now is going to demonstrate right number 1 for us.
Careful. It's going for 33 maybe. If you watch him spin...
Thank you.
One thing they do say in the book is the way he's doing it is you're supposed to be picking your feet up and placing them as opposed to like pivoting around on your heel. You're actually fully picking up the feet as you spin around. Right.
After pondering the issue, and I kind of take the Taoist approach. If you're in a yacht and you're sailing across the equator, you notice one day the water goes down one way, and once you're over, it'll go down the other way. So unless a Rinpoche tells me otherwise, I'm going to go counterclockwise in the southern hemisphere.
I'll present the alternative point of view on that. And truthfully, I don't know the answer to this. This is something I think you're going to have to figure out for yourself. But I'll just say this. The book itself, where the information came out of the northern hemisphere, and there's no mention and so they teach you to go clockwise, the opposite of the way Matthew was spinning. In the original manuscript that came out, there's no mention whatsoever of going in the opposite direction in the southern hemisphere. There's no mention whatsoever of the southern hemisphere. So the idea of spinning in the opposite direction, that's something that's, that somebody or another has decided would be appropriate. I've thought about it a lot myself. The first time it was an issue for me was about 3 years ago when we went to visit John and Anita in the Cook Islands, which was my first time in the southern hemisphere. I asked John at the time what he thought about it, and he said he didn't know one way or another. He didn't have an opinion on it at that time. I've thought about it a lot myself over the years, and one thing that I've considered is this: to the best of my experience, I believe your chakras still spin in the same direction no matter which hemisphere you're in. And that seems to be the case when I've tested it with pendulums and all that sort of thing. It seems to me that the person's chakras are still spinning. I mean, I know water goes down the drain opposite and all that, but to me it seems like the chakras are still going in the same direction. And so I choose to continue. I spin the same in either hemisphere. So, I mean, it's up to you guys how you want to do it, but I'll just put out that other point of view.
Okay. All right. Now we're going to have number 2 done by Sakara.
And I'm open to the possibility that I might be wrong on that, but I just want you to understand there's nothing in writing on this.
If you spin the wrong way, could it have the opposite effect?
It certainly could. So it's actually quite important because they say
yes.
if you go the wrong way, you'll drain yourself.
It is aging, yes. Is the table in the right place for the camera?
The original manuscript says clockwise. It comes from the northern hemisphere, and it doesn't make any mention of the southern hemisphere one way or another. There's videos out nowadays that will tell you have to spin the opposite direction in the southern hemisphere, but I'm just saying that as far as I know, that's just someone's opinion, and everybody's got their own opinion. I'm just expressing mine here. We did do some muscle testing back in Auckland. Brooke had been doing it the other direction, and we tested him going in either direction, and it did seem that going clockwise was better for him. But, I mean, again, I'm certainly open to the possibility that it might not be so. I'm just telling you what I do.
Doug, if you were testing with a pendulum with the upper chakras, do you actually test at the base?
Tested all of them.
Yeah, because apparently that goes straight down. These ones actually come out back and front of the body. The top one goes up and the bottom one goes down. So
right, I'm just saying
you would have had to test it right at the base.
You can still get a spin going this way, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm just saying in my observation, it's going the same direction in either hemisphere.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, Anna?
Just a suggestion, you could actually test the person after they did it one way. Yes, the energy and oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, we did that with Brooke, and clockwise seemed to work better.
And also at the end of the spin, I noticed that Matthew, he centered himself like so. I was taught to do it. And if you don't center yourself, you find yourself wobbling right around the place. So at the end of it, center yourself.
Thank you, Gary. Sakara, do you need a pad on here to do it, or can you do it right? You could do it right on there? Okay. Is the table in the right place for the camera? Okay. All right, Sakara is going to do number 2. Pardon me? Is that okay now, or still shall I remove it? Okay. Okay.
You put your hands under your buttocks. Breathe out as you go up.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Notice how she keeps the knees straight.
What I've read in the original book on this is that you actually bring the chin up to the chest first, then you bring the legs up, then you bring the legs down, then you put the head down, is what it says to do in the book. Like, in other words, get the head up, then the legs up, then the legs down, then the head down is what the instructions are in the book. Yeah. I don't know, the way that I've read it in the book and the way I was taught, you start off in this position, you bring the chin to the chest first, then the legs up, then you let the legs down, then you let the head down. Yeah.
Yes, she's doing
No,
it.
No. Head up, legs down, head down. That's what the book says. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Did everyone see that now? She's not going to do 21 of those, but I just want to make a point of here, the legs. You keep the legs straight. They're not bent at the knees. Now, a lot of it, like I can't even get mine up that far all the way up the way she can. So what I did on this one is I have to take one leg at a time and do it. And then what I got to the point where I could just get it up to here. I couldn't get it all the way up to there. So you'll have to maybe work with that, of taking it to smaller proportions to get it all the way up, if that one is hard for you.
What you can also do in this one, where you've got your hands under your butt there, which will help protect the lower back, is your fingers are actually angled about like that. In other words, your fingers aren't pointing straight to your feet, but they're turned in a little bit like that. So you got your two hands about like this. Yeah, somewhere along, maybe not quite 45, but you turn them in a bit. Yeah.
Okay, Sakara, now she's going to do number 3.
Actually, Sakara, before you go on, if anyone's got any back problems at all, doing that exercise could be quite harsh on the back.
Yes.
And particularly, you should keep your abdominal muscles concaved in and not get a hyperextension in there from an exercise point of view. A lot of people have back problems, and that puts a huge amount of stress on that, using the back as a fulcrum there. So something to consider.
Okay, this is number 3. The mic in.
I thought I remembered reading that if you couldn't pick up your whole leg, you only picked up the knees and let the legs hang down.
If you are to that point, if you can't even do that, you could just pick up your knees like that. Yes.
That's what it says in the literature.
Yes, you could do that. If you can't even get your leg, then just pick up your knee like that.
I thought Sakara did them rather rapidly. I found that the greatest good come from doing them in a normal breathing time. So the slower they're done, the longer the tension is on. And after all, it is all about straightening the spine.
It's very important, the breathing. And in the book, as you read it, you'll find out, they tell you in there how to breathe, when to breathe in, when to breathe out. I believe it was breathing in as you pick up the legs.
You're exhaling as you go up and inhaling as you go down.
Okay. Okay, number 3. The trick with this one, what I found, from having arthritis, I found that it was very hard on my knees. And I had to put something soft under there because I couldn't get down like that at first when I first started doing it. So you might also find that other people here.
It's a long time since I've read the book on this myself, but I learned a couple different things on this one. One is that you'd have your toes tucked under, like you'd have your feet... That's how I learned it with the feet.
That's right.
Bent under like that.
Right.
And then the other thing that I learned is that you'd start off. You keep a 90-degree bend at the knees, like you're not bending back in this part. You're bending at the waist, which is what you're doing. But I learned that when you're in that position, you'd start off with your hands in the front, and then as you went back, you actually slid your hand around so that the hand was moving as well. Is the way I learned it. Yeah, the book is actually the one that I've seen is inconsistent in terms of the written descriptions and then the pictures they show. Mm-hmm. And then there's different versions of it out. So I'm just sharing that I've seen it done different ways, and I don't know which is correct. I've tried them different ways.
That's fine. Did everyone see that? Everyone see that one? Okay. And the toes are under on that one. The hands are... You might want to just shift around that way so these people can see it. Just do a couple, maybe 3 for the people over here.
Exhale on the way back, inhale on the way forward.
Okay, thank you, Sakara. Let's give her a hand. She's doing a great job. Okay, and 4 is going to be done by Brooke.
This one here, I originally was shown to had the legs out. I'll do that one first, and I'll just quickly show you that, and then I'll quickly show you the other way, which I learnt from Doug, and I think he'll probably explain a little bit more on that.
Notice the hands are pointing toward the feet.
One of the books
legs are straight.
The book that I've seen doesn't actually tell which way to point the hands, and it's got 2 different pictures, and in one picture they're pointing forward, in one picture they're pointing backward. But I find doing it like Brooke has it with the hands pointing forward, it's way less stress on your wrists. So I would recommend that way.
That's on the picture here.
It's going to be a little bit difficult. Hang on a minute. One way was to start off in this position and actually come up with your feet, like this, and then go into the arch, like this, and then come back down. And as you come back down, you take the weight off your legs and drop them down again. So in a smooth movement, that would look like this. Like that. And the other way is just, that I was shown, was just to keep your feet like this and just to go straight up, like this. Which is a lot easier for most people. But the important thing is to keep the pivot on the shoulders and keep the arms as straight as possible, and to really arch up and invert it as high as you can. So do a few more?
Yeah, just do a couple more so people can see it.
Well, I keep my legs straight.
I do too.
And I don't move my heels at all. No, I just keep my legs straight, and the feet and the hands don't move at all.
Right.
I just go right up.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Just like that.
Yeah.
The feet and the hands stay in the same position. The other thing too is when you start with your chin tucked, because the purpose of the chin tucking, which you've got in a number of the exercises, is that's very specific for this chakra, for where you have your thyroid.
Right.
So it's very important that you don't. A lot of people don't bother with that, but that's quite important that you do the, that part. So this one, you start with the chin tucked.
Notice that he gets up like a
coffee table
there. Now, you may find that you cannot get up that high, so you do the best you can. But you get a real workout on this one, let me tell you.
In one of the original books on this I read, they made the point that it's better to do the exercise like in part than to not do it at all.
Right.
And they said with some of the elderly people that couldn't do this one, they would put like a little crate down below them, so they wouldn't go all the way down. They'd only, really maybe only go down 6 inches or so, but they would just do the upper part of the exercise and just come down slightly and rest on the crate, and they still got wonderful benefits. And then eventually, somewhere down the line, they could get rid of the crate.
Right. You remove the crate then. Yeah, so that would be an option.
Exhale on the way up, inhale on the way down.
Okay, is everyone clear on that?
It's just
one?
like weightlifting. You on the strenuous part of the exercise, you're exhaling and then you're inhaling on the other part.
Okay, we're going to do number 5 now. Brooke's going to demonstrate that. That's the starting position, right there. Heels flat.
I start the other way. Yeah,
you start on the ground?
Yeah, I start. Well, no, up, but I mean like this way. Yeah, up like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Is that good? Can you just
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
You could see the strength in the arms here to do that. It takes tremendous strength.
They don't really talk in the book about whether to bend your arms or not. So for some people, if you have a hard time with this one, you can do it where you keep your arms straight the whole time, and that won't take quite as much strength. But I think if you're able to do it, it's nice to do it the way Brooke's doing it, where you bend the arms on the way down.
Right. I had to break this one up when I was first doing it because there was no way I could do it like that. So you could do certain sections of it, break it up to get to the full.
And it's definitely a lot easier to do if you keep your arms straight. So for some people where the strength is the issue, just keep the arms straight, and you won't get the full range of motion, but you'll still get a lot of benefit.
Please come up if you have a question. Please come up to the microphone.
Could you demonstrate that for people who can't do what you're doing, for elderly people or something, please? Thank you.
Yeah.
It's good to stretch them right down, and get the heels on the ground. And then just to come, like that.
They don't say about either bent or straight on the arms. It doesn't really say, and they don't show the whole motion. They just show the up and the down.
Is up.
That's very hard, so it takes a while to work to get to that stage. So don't get discouraged if you can't do that at first. But that was excellent, Brooke. Let's give him a hand. Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Sakara. And thank you, Brooke. Beautiful demonstration. Any other questions that anyone has on this? Yes, Ian.
I'd just like to make a comment. When I first started doing these, being that I'm into doing hard physical exercise, I went full on with them, thinking I was going to get a workout, and I did them for about 6 weeks full on, and I felt worse. And like trying to make every part of it as hard as possible and rush through it. Then I slowed them right down, like Gary said, and I did breathing with them, and I tried to make them more simple, and I felt much better. So that may be a lesson for some people.
Thank you. Yes.
Just a point that there seem to be a lot of questions on what is the breathing with exercise. Now, it's just natural if you think about it. If you're compressing your stomach and lung capacity, you would be exhaling. Don't try to inhale while you're compressing. You're just going to make it hard for yourself. So if you're stretching out and opening the capacity, that's the time more air will go in. So don't try to fight that.
I've done these exercises off and on for, I guess, about 10 years, and I don't really think of them as a physical exercise, as where Ian was talking about them as a workout. That's just not how I really experience them. I just feel of them as something that's getting the chakras going, and
right.
And to me, once you're used to doing them and you're just doing them very nice and slowly and gently, it's not even really much of a workout. I mean, I don't even break a sweat doing them. It's just getting the body, just getting everything going in the morning.
Right. No comment?
It only takes about 5 minutes, too. It's no big deal. Once you're used to it.
Maggie.
Well, I do think of them as a physical exercise. And I found that my body's much stronger and my muscle tone's much better from doing them regularly. And you'll find that with these 5 exercises, they really hit all the muscles in the body, every area. And they look really simple, and they are pretty simple to do, but they hit every single one. And I always feel much stronger when I've been doing them.
Just a thought that came to mind. It's okay going into these exercises which take 5 minutes, but do we really need to do a little bit of warming up first?
Some people might, yes. And I'm not going to demonstrate number 6. I'm going to leave that for the people who really want to know it to read it themselves in the book.
I must be rather slow because it takes me a quarter of an hour to 20 minutes to do them properly.
Thank you, Gary. Any other questions on the rights? I also think of them as a spiritual exercise more than a physical one, but I do get a good workout as I'm doing it. But I am concentrating on the chakras, the different chakras as I'm doing it.
To the answer of your question, actually, you don't need a warm-up at all. They are a warm-up in themselves.
That's how I feel when I do them.
On the sixth rite, I'm not sure about this, but I've often thought that it might be highly beneficial for those people that are practicing Tantra.
For those practicing Tantra, the sixth rite might be beneficial to you if you're not engaging in sex.
What form of Tantra? Then this would not apply to those people. Because in the sexual Tantra will keep people limited to the lower chakra system. Okay? For celibacy, this is when the sixth rite would apply. And this celibacy would be different than what you have in the Tantra system.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Yes, Rebecca.
Do you have any comment as to whether you spin in the same direction or opposite direction in southern versus northern hemispheres?
I haven't actually read the book, but I've spoken to the Lama. I haven't read the book, but I've spoken to the Lama about the rites. And but one thing that I didn't ask was if the reason the sixth rite wasn't done is because when you do it, then you're supposed to be celibate for the rest of your earth life, or?
Yes.
Okay.
The rest of your earth life.
Okay, I just asked John for
Well,
clarity.
your spiritual life too afterward.
I just asked John on the subject of whether you should spin in same direction or opposite directions in different hemispheres, and
It's very simple. You keep the same system whether you're in the northern or southern hemisphere.
Yes.
I would just like to know which direction the chakras spin.
it's
clockwise.
Well, no, they spin different directions, and it's different for men and women. It's opposite for a man and a woman each chakra.
But clockwise.
No. The spin is clockwise. But she asked which direction the chakras spin, and chakras don't all spin in the same direction. Her question was which direction do it.
I understand that, but that's why I thought we were spinning clockwise.
No. But her question wasn't which direction to spin. Her question was which direction do a person's chakras spin.
Clockwise. All of them spin clockwise. Now, all of them spin clockwise. Now, if you have a problem where you have a negative spin to the chakra, then you're in deep trouble, because some will spin to the negative or contra clockwise, so to speak, and this is not good. But we have to correct those and get the spin all in a clockwise manner. And this sometimes takes a bit of work, because some people do have the negative clockwise spin that you can see it, and that has to be corrected.
Yes, Sama.
You have to take a realization here that in every chakra you will have a double picture. It's like two inverted cones touching, and one will be clockwise from the front and the other will be reversed in the back.
I'm a little confused on this, because I've always been taught that the chakras on a man and a woman would be opposite.
Also, there's many other chakras that we haven't talked about. There's chakras in the knees and the hands and the feet, which are also, I believe, being affected by this spin and the other exercises.
There's a lot of channeled information out there that has been totally inaccurate.
Okay.
Sama.
This concerns the sixth exercise, which is the sexual right. So if you decide to go for the 7-year celibacy, you don't need to do that before going on that.
Say that again?
If you decide to go, for example, for celibacy for 7 years,
yes,
would you do that exercise before you go on that, or you don't need it?
Well, I think it would help, because what you're doing with the sixth exercise is you're bringing that sexual energy into the other chakras to be used in other ways.
This is because it seems as if from somebody's question, I can't remember exactly who, I heard that you only do it if you're going to be celibate for life. Is that what I heard?
Well, yes, when you make the decision to become celibate, they say that's when you should commit to the sixth exercise.
But when you're making the decision to become temporarily celibate, you don't have to do that.
That's when you do it.
You could always stop and go down scale.
One thing that struck me when you were talking about some of the chakras spinning one way and some spinning the other, could this be the whole reason for doing these exercises, so as to get all your chakras rotating in the same way?
What was the question?
Would the reason for doing these exercises be to get all your chakras spinning in the same way, where you've got some spinning one way and some spinning the other? Would that be the reason for doing the exercises?
There are many, many people, when you start studying their chakras, which we are able to get in contact with to know exactly how fast they're spinning. Many times the pineal, pituitary, thyroid, thymus area, they're all blocked off. And if they're spinning at all, they're spinning very, very slowly, where for most people, the chakras in the lower region are spinning rapidly. Now, for people who have come out of the sexual realm, okay, then oftentimes the lower area is shut down, and the upper chakras are spinning very rapidly when they're doing a lot of meditation and so on. Now, what we have to look at here is we have to have a balance where there's an increased speed in all the chakra systems. Now, there's duality in all things, so every chakra that you see coming forth, which with a clockwise spin, if you take a very close look at that, you will find that in the back it's spinning exactly the opposite way, because you have your duality in all things. A lot of people say, well, there's only one chakra, but it's like if you take a stick and you wobble the stick like this. You have a cone on one side and you have a cone on the other side, but they're both going opposite directions. And the same thing will be true about the chakra system, because there's duality in all things. And we have to understand that duality, and sometimes that duality is all fouled up. So we have to get the chakra systems going so that they're all equally functioning properly. And because of our misuse of laws, we foul this whole thing up, so nothing's working properly. And one chakra that's all bound up will have a tendency to pull all the chakra systems down.
So in other words, what it means is that we not only get them all spinning in the same direction, but we get them all spinning at the same speed, which is what the object of the exercise is. This is the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
And that is what I have been taught, and that was we spent long time working on chakra speeds and bringing them all up to the same speeds, at which time the body then balances out and becomes healthy and well. Now these rites, according to my understanding, help to speed up the chakras so they're all basically at the same speed and the body is balanced.
I have a question then.
Yes, sir.
If you're familiar with George Yao's work with the pulsars, which
yes.
you are, where he'll have diagrams where he'll show a male and a female body, and he's talking, he's not really saying chakras, I guess, but he's talking like positive and negative poles in the different energy centers. Is this apples and oranges, or is he just full of nonsense? Because he has them as exactly as opposite in a man's and a woman's body.
I was in George Yao's home when he was working on the positive pulsar and the negative pulsar. There's one pulsar that he uses, which is the positive pulsar. But if you put it over pain, the pain drops away. We know that. We've been there. But he had a negative pulsar that he was working with, and we're trying to combine both the positive and the negative pulsars to see how they would work. And this is getting into history, okay? But people using only the negative pulsar would go completely insane. And in his house, where he used only the negative pulsars, it drove out all of the snails, all of the animal life. Everything left the place, and the house was virtually dead, and people did go insane at that time in the early stages of using the negative pulsar. Now that's where the negative pulsar is no longer used, and only the positive pulsar is used, which is taken to take the negative energy and convert all of that into positive energy, which is life-giving to the body.
But you're familiar with the illustrations in its book where he'll show the energy centers on a male versus a female body, and if you take the ones down the midline of the body, if it's a positive on a man, it would be a negative on a woman, to where then if the man and the woman were face-to-face, things would cancel out. And I'm just wondering if you believe that's accurate. Is this apples and oranges?
I know that George wrote that in his book. I have no understanding as to where he got that from. Okay? With all due respect to George, he's a wonderful man. We spent many months together. We spent many months in Mexico together. And that George is a brilliant man. But some of the things that he says, I have no way of proving or disproving.
So you're saying every last chakra on the body, male or female, if you're looking at a person this way, is going to be going clockwise when they're healthy?
That's what I have learned, and that's what I have seen. It's an amazing thing. Now, other people write what they want to write. But the thing is, this is wherein, we're not dealing with the spirit. See, we're not dealing with the physical body, we're dealing with the spirit. And the spirit is manifested down through the body, and the principles are the same for both male and female in this respect.
Okay,
and that's why this works for both male and female.
I'm just trying to get clarified on this for myself. I'm not arguing, I'm just trying to understand this.
Yeah, right here in the book, it says, these energy vortexes revolve at great speed. When all are revolving at high speed and at the same rate of speed, the body is in perfect health.
That's correct.
When one or more of them slow down, aging and physical deterioration set in. So I think that's an answer to Duncan's question. Yes.
Because I was thinking, because Doc checked one evening, we checked you out and Ian, and we checked me out, and it was like the men it was switching. One was turning in that direction, so I think... No, you both were going in the same directions. This one and this one was going in the same direction, but then it was switching. Yeah. No, and I was thinking also on the third symbol of the Reiki, because I didn't tell that to people. It's also been used just to, the vortex. For both male and female, that's how we do that, to bring them in the chakras to balance them. Yeah, it's anti-clockwise.
No, it's clockwise.
Anti-clockwise. Oh, yeah. And that's been used to bring in the chakras.
If you're facing the other way toward the body, it would be clockwise.
But if you put it on somebody's body, it would be anti-clockwise. Like if you draw it the way you're drawing it, it would be anti-clockwise.
Yeah, but they're seeing it clockwise.
They're seeing it clockwise from their body.
Yeah, but then they're seeing it clockwise, but if they're looking at their own chakras, they'd be seeing those anti-clockwise. So
it's a good question. It's still a symbol.
It would...
And And perhaps the symbol being stationary would be another matter entirely because it's not motion.
But same with your chakra. It's definitely going the opposite direction of the chakra. If Janine draws the symbol on me, it's definitely going the opposite direction that my chakra should be going. Because the mirror image thing applies.
But it's not moving, Doug.
Yeah.
It's not moving. It's stationary. So you have a whole different ball of wax here between stationary figures and forms. You're not dealing with motion here. Only in the drawing of it. I think we'd better do some research on that.
Okay, so let me understand this right. The chakras, the idea is to balance them in a sense so they're all spinning at a more rapid pace, but also spinning at the same rate of pace. And so once you have that, you're in, like it suggests, a point of balance or good health. Is that going to help you get into like more of a healing crisis, that the body is going to be that way, or is it that the fact that nobody's chakras would be spilling at the same rate and at an even pace because everybody is in a state of unhealth?
The healing crisis accelerates gradually the chakra system. But in the healing crisis, the chakras themselves will go back in reverse order to the illness the person had, where the chakras might stop entirely.
So if you're doing the 5 rites in the morning and they're spinning the chakras up, that's going to enable the body to go through a healing crisis more readily?
Maybe.
Okay. My other question was...
I know when I was doing them in India, I went into a tremendous healing crisis because of the muscles used also. A lot of stuff was coming out of that, throwing me into healing crisis.
Yeah, I think in the book too, just like I started out just going straight and doing 21 of everything. And I felt quite ill for quite a period of time and went into quite a lot of healing crisis. But I just kept doing it. And I think it says in the book that you start off at, say, 1 or 3 or 5, and you go up every, say, you go, is it 7? Well, it starts off at an odd number at a low amount, let's say 7, and then you would do all 5 exercises 7 times each for a week, and then the next week you would go up 2 to 9, and then for a week, and then to 11, and if you felt ill or whatever, you would stay at that until you felt good, and you just keep working your way up at that odd pace, and then 13, 15, 17, 19, and 21. That's what I read in the book. But my other question was,
back to this other bit, I'm not trying to put you off on this about healing crisis. Maybe it will put you into healing crisis, and maybe it just helps you to maintain balance.
Yeah, well, I'm still trying to figure that one out. I'm just thinking with reference to the scale of emotions, and you've got the different chakras that are charged up, or if you like, and balanced or spun at a higher rate.
Don't worry about that at this point of time. No, don't worry about that at this point of time, because suddenly you'll see the chakras and you'll see them in your body. But don't try to push it. Don't try to understand something intellectually which is only experiential. Well, you understand what you understand intellectually, but you don't understand it until you're experiencing the emotion along with the chakra. Then you're there. And then no words can explain it. You cannot understand something intellectually that is experientially brought upon the person's consciousness.
You first need to have an intellectual understanding in order to gain the right principles and activity to gain the experience and the knowledge.
That's right.
So that's what I'm trying to...
Well, you'll have a hard time doing that.
Peter.
As I understand it or don't understand it, if we've got private agenda And if we've got judgments and resistances in the chakras, which we have at different levels, all the exercise in the world is not going to correct that. You can't do it from a physical level.
Okay, one of the prime responsibilities of you as instructors is to keep as accurate track, moment by moment, as you know how, of conditions that are happening with each of the people under your care as an instructor. For example, if Dave Lewis has a problem, where's Dave? Dave Lewis? Is Dave here? Okay, well, if Dave Lewis has a problem with his arm, where his arm is in pain, and is still numb from the point holding, where he can't use his fingers, for a person who has that problem, it is a very difficult problem for them. And we should pay careful attention on that rather than just saying, well, you're just stuck in a healing crisis, tough. Well, we need to take a look at this a little bit and have compassion for these people who are stuck in the middle of a problem that hasn't been completed. In Hawaii, I had one gentleman that had, it was the first time we had a seminar in Hawaii. We're out at a Boy Scout camp on the West Maui area, and we had a large crew there of about 100, again, a large class. One gentleman got stuck in a picture, and as instructors you need to become aware of this. He got stuck in a picture of being in the Civil War where he had his leg shot off, and his leg was numb. And we had a gentleman working on his ischial tuberosity, and his leg went completely numb and stayed numb. Now, he reran the situation where he hated everybody because his leg was numb and shot off during the Civil War. And his hatred was it just came out in tremendous anger and so on. And he quit the seminar right in the middle of the seminar, and it left his leg numb for about 6 months. And he hobbled around on it. Now, you have to understand, from an instructional point of view, that if a person has a certain point held, we can have our head numb for 3 or 4 months, or we can have our fingers numb for a couple of months, and this becomes a little sad in some ways because we don't have the full feeling of our body. Now, I would encourage all of you to go ahead and finish those points and have compassion as instructors for the people that have numb fingers that haven't finished a point, and do all in your power to have that corrected properly. Where we go back on assignments, on the sheets with the people, we go back and make sure that those particular areas are corrected. Now, granted, there may be other extenuating circumstances because the numbness is the unconsciousness area, and perhaps we have pictures that we're stuck in that we are not aware of yet. And this becomes a struggle sometimes to deal with. But nevertheless, about once or twice a year, you run up against somebody who had their arm cut off, and suddenly their arm is totally numb, and they have all this anger and resentment and numbness and whatnot tied into that from some past life, and all they can do is think about their arm being cut off while their arm is numb. Now, you'll find a lot of people who are in the martial arts that have that particular problem. Now, this problem of pain in the back, unfinished point holding, I would like to have Ian come up here for a moment, if he would, please, Ian. And I want to make a point here. on what will happen if we start working on a point and we are not sufficiently determined to work through the point. Ian, come up here, please, if you would. Now, we had people working on Ian, on his back, and it was a situation here wherein the back wasn't finishing up and was still in tremendous pain. Now, Ian, would you like to tell your little story on that? Day before, yesterday, and then yesterday. About the working on your spine, working on your back. Well, let's start with the day before yesterday. Yep.
The whole story. Truth, nothing but the truth. Okay, when was it? Wednesday? I started working on the spine, and my finger actually. Do you want to talk about all the tie-ins and everything that happened? Do you want me to go into that?
Just the specific details that will be meaningful to this group of people.
Okay. All right. I had a broken finger about 10 years ago. This one here was out on a right angle during a martial arts competition, and it was broken, and then I dislocated it about 2 months ago doing some other thing. And I've got a few lumps in my spine that we're working on, and on Wednesday, Anton was in the back on my spine point, which was actually a heart point on the spine. And I was going through quite a bit of pain. I went through quite a bit of emotion. It was pretty exciting to me how everything came together. It's a little bit of a personal situation, but this is actually a ring finger, and I used to be married. And I didn't really recognize it till I was going through the pain and the emotion that I was reliving one of my serious relationships as I was going through the pain in the back. Don't like to say And what sort of happened was, it was Valentine's Day, and someone I was very close to in a serious relationship, it was their birthday, as I'd forgotten. This was about 10 or 15 years ago. Someone came and put some red roses on the table behind and said, "Oh, it's Valentine's Day." I went straight into that flash, and then I remembered the ring finger, which it sort of wasn't tapped in my mind. My heart was hurting. I had burning through my heart. In fact, it hurt. It felt like my heart was broken, and I said that to someone. Felt like someone was stitching it up with a needle. So heart points in the back, wedding ring, finger broken, St. Valentine's Day, ex-wife's birthday. Just things just kept coming together like that through the whole thing, which was fairly emotional. Anyway, the points wasn't really finished, and the next day we did it again, Peter got an enormous amount of electricity out of my finger. In fact, I think he commented that it's the most pain he's ever got out of anyone's point. I didn't feel a thing. It's kind of like it that way. The next day we worked on the finger again. I got massive amounts of pain, and Pete didn't get much at all. So I guess that was a trade-off on the next day. We were working on the back point again, and I was trying to endure as much pain as possible. And I think I said to these guys, let's just get straight into the pain, because for me, what I've found in the point holding sessions, we have a point holding group back in Hamilton, and like we hold points for an hour or 2 or 3 at the most, and then we all have a nice cup of tea and have a nice talk and go home. And people sit there and this is nice, and in a semi-meditative state. And I realize now that we have to elicit the pain, and the sooner we get into the pain, for me this has been, the sooner we get on with it. And the more extreme the pain, the quicker we get on with it. So I was there, and I was saying to Anton, just push a bit harder, and I was trying to access the pain, and I thought I was in pain. In fact, I was in pain. And then John came along, and for those of you that know, it's kind of scary, because you hear the voice and you go away from me, and then you go, damn, I'm resisting it, I'm going to draw it to me. It's either John or Doug. It really doesn't matter. You hear that voice and you kind of go, yeah, and then you go, no, I love them. Stay here, stay there, and you try and get out of it that way. That doesn't work. So you play these mental games, which is kind of fun. And anyway, he came over and pushed on my back.
What you ought to try, Ian, is try to resist us leaving.
Mental note. There's got to be some way around it. You know? There has to be some way around it.
Try not to think of us holding your points.
Yeah. So anyway, those of you may have heard me yesterday. Most of the time I was a little opposed to crying on the table when I first came here. I haven't done that before, and I'm a rock. So I got involved with that in the last few point holdings when I've been here, and I'm quite comfortable. Not that I'm opposed to crying as such, but crying on the table is a bit of a sign of weakness in the martial arts, let's say. So that's something we have to change over there. Yeah, I love to cry. I hate to cry. I love and hate to cry at the same time. So I got into that, and then I'm not really one on yelling a lot, like I see a lot of people yelling, and I think that's fine, people can do that, but I kind of, if I've got a word pattern, I just say it to myself and mumble it, because I don't think you really need to get it out there. I don't think you need to scream. Anyway, cut a long story short, John comes over and starts putting his fist in my back on the other side from Anton, and starts telling Anton to, weigh about 10 ton and we'll all push together. So anyway, every time I breathed in, John encouraged me to yell, and I sort of was going, like this, and then I'd take another breath and he'd push harder each time, and the yelling and just encouraged me to yell and scream, and in the end I was screaming, and I don't know how long. I have no concept of time. Someone said to me, how long are you in pain? It could have been 3 seconds or 3 weeks. I really don't know how long it was. But anyway, we went through that, pushed, and I went to pain where I couldn't breathe, I couldn't speak. My rib cage felt so crushed that I couldn't even get any words in, and I was actually groaning and uttering and just growling. I thought to myself, an entity at last. But it wasn't. Not that I know of, anyway. And it just collapsed me, and I just about got off the table. In fact, if Anton hadn't been on my other side, I was kind of pinned from both sides of my spine, so otherwise I would have got off. And it's the most pain I've ever experienced in my life, and I've been through a lot of pain. I raced motocross for 7 years. I did a whole bunch of sports that involved crashing my brains out on a regular basis. In fact, I'm still involved in it a little bit. So about 2 seconds before the pain stopped, I couldn't take it anymore, and I'd totally given in. I have a way of shutting down pain, and I got that with John part way in, and then I think, I got this, and then he kept going, and it just overrided that system, and to hell with that, you just got to let that one go. So, and it just, about 2 seconds before the pain stopped, I'd given up, and I just about pulled off the table, and then the pain just shut down, and it stopped, and John was pushing as hard as he could, and there was no pain. And like I say, that was the most pain I've ever experienced in my life, and I went away and lay down in my bed in the room and had a fever, a sort of a shivering, hot, sweating fever for a little while, and sort of stayed there for a bit, and got up later on, and people asked, how was it? In fact, I went to the toilet and spat up some blood. I don't know where that came from, but that was kind of interesting too. So, and I sort of said, well, it was the most pain I'd ever had. And people were going, oh, wow. And then I looked at it and I thought, and I could probably go do it again. And those of you that have had severe pain or severe injuries, which I've had a lot of in my life, you never say you want to go and do that again, You don't say that, and I wonder where the mentality is that I could say, well, you could probably go through that again, I don't know where that comes from, but it's interesting.
Stay here for a moment. Bottom line, if we didn't get him through the pain from the injury, which I perceived, where you were flipped backwards on your back, and you wrenched your back at that time, and you couldn't breathe, and you still got up because you didn't want anybody to know how badly you were hurt, correct?
Yeah, very true.
And he just couldn't breathe, but he didn't let on to anybody that happened. The whole thing was suppressed. And from that time on, we've had a problem with the back. We've had a problem with the lack of feeling. We've had a problem with numbness. That we've had a tie-in from that into the heart area because of the reflex action to the heart. Now, the thing I want to instruct you on is that you can play, pinch your digits with somebody, and just kind of hold a little point and have a nice little tea party, which some point-holding groups do.
Wait till I get back to Hamilton.
And but the thing is you very gently, which I was gentle with him, move into the point, never giving him any more than what he can handle, until suddenly he's into the picture, which he was. Full memory. Is that correct, sir?
That's true, yep.
And full memory where I can't breathe. Now, a word pattern like that, suppressed, will have a deep effect upon the lungs and upon the entire life system and the body itself. And this is the type of trauma that we have to eventually move out in order that the person is capable of bringing out a healing in the body and the emotions, and eventually then the human mind on the mental body level. But the thing is, Ian reached a point. What's the one word that would encompass this idea where he couldn't take it anymore, and then he did? What's the one word which would be appropriate here? Surrender. And you surrender into the pain. And at that point of time, Ian, what happened to the pain?
It stopped.
Now, we've had about 2 days of burning.
Yep.
About 2 days of burning, searing pain through there.
Yep.
And it took us a long time to get Ian to get that burning, searing pain.
That's true. I never had any burning in the body until about halfway through this course. And then...
that's been about 3 years.
Yep.
And we finally, after 3 years, we finally got him into the burning, searing pain.
I totally understand burning, searing, blowtorch pain now. I was sitting there. In fact, the first time I had it, I was out there going, I sort of felt this warm feeling, and I went, blowtorch, this is not a blowtorch. I've been burnt before, and it just built up, and I went, oh shit, I know what a blowtorch is. I can feel it.
Okay. Now, Ian, is there anything more you want to say here? But Ian, as an instructor, understands now because he went through it and was able to release this tremendous pain that was blocking his progress.
I think Anton made a comment to someone. I heard it via someone else that he wasn't feeling happy about the amount of pain that he was putting on me. Would that be true, Anton? And I guess that's the look at sympathy and empathy right there. I've had a few years of not bothering about inflicting pain on other people, so I can handle it. That sounds horrible, but I think you have to look at it from it's not you're putting the pain on them. It's their pain coming out, and I felt that 100%. And I think we have to get away from the fact that we really don't want to hurt anyone, because for me, the quicker we got the severe pain, the quicker we went through things, the more I resisted it, the longer it took. So, yeah, I think that's something to think of, something I've definitely learned, that encourage the person to go through it and put as much as they can lovingly and willingly accept. And what you can lovingly, willingly accept is tenfold on what you think you can lovingly and willingly accept.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. Now you have that memory. Take that message to Hamilton. Gently, I wouldn't apply that type of pressure to somebody to begin with, because it's taken about 3 years, Ian, to bring you to the point where you could handle it. Now that, I'm not putting Ian down, but I'm saying it took 3 years to bring him to the point where he would be able to handle it. And don't expect anybody else to have any less ability or any greater ability than that, because Ian knows how to handle pain. So please keep that in mind. Work gently, work slowly at first, and bring up the person's capacity gradually to handle pain. And if you have to have a tea party for a couple of years, then let's have it. Okay? I remember in Colorado Springs there was a group there that a ladies' quilting party. And they did their quilts, you know, and then they had a body electronics program afterwards. And they sat around laughing and scratching and having fun holding points as everybody gradually got well. No great pain, but everyone got well. And from the report, I didn't know any of the people, but this is the report that came back. You know, they listened to tapes. They had a couple of people that had seminars and to oversee it, you know, and that had come from Indiana to Colorado. And everyone was happy, but there was no great pain. But the point of it all is you move up to a certain level of progression, and then you have to get through the pain. Now, Ian, do you have something you want to say, sir?
I kind of overshadowed the fact that my broken finger of 10 years is actually fixed, and I'd like to thank Pete for that because the other pain was so extreme.
That's beautiful. Now, hang on a moment, please. Now, Ian, did you or did you not have tremendous burning, searing pain all through the chest and heart area? Come on up here, please. I want to kind of, you know, you find a situation which is a good teaching experience, and you milk it for all you got. Okay?
Unaccustomed as I am to public speaking. Yes, I had burning pain up through the heart here. In fact, it was shooting up inside. Through very close to the sternum here, more into the heart and also around into the lungs as well. It was traveling around. In fact, a little bit towards the end, it actually went down below the first rib as well. So yeah, it was kind of moving all over, and it's just to me it felt like a very tiny jet of water just burning its way around in different squiggles and doing all sorts of things. And that's when I kind of figured that my broken heart was getting stitched up. Maybe.
Thank you, sir. Now, next point, as instructors, you're going to find a lot of people out there who do not understand healing crisis at the depth that many of you are beginning to understand it. Some of you may not understand it fully for another couple of years as you get deeper into this work, but you will understand it as you continue on. It's inevitable. But a lot of people say the heart needs to be opened. And so there are some people that we've dealt with that use the Bach flower remedies, and they say, you use these Bach flower remedies and the heart will be opened, rather than having it shut down because of the pain that we've gone through. You have other people that use homeopathic remedies and say this will balance up the body and this will open up the heart. If you do these spins so many times a day, this will open up the heart. If you do this, if you do that, it'll open up the heart. If you do your Tantra yoga, this will open up the heart. And people have different things that they sincerely believe in which will open up the heart. All you are doing is playing games with people. When you're using your little crystals on people to open up the heart, when you're using music to open up the heart and so on, when you have so much pain that's blocking the area, that pain will not come out because the person has suppressed it so deep that they cannot open up the heart. They cannot open up that heart when the heart is tied in. And Ian, I want you to say something about this if you feel so disposed to. You have all these different tricks and gimmicks that people have for opening up the heart. If you use this little pyramid and wear it around the top of your head, this will open up your heart. You know, and you go down to some of the great, you go down to Pasadena to these different areas, and you have people using half moons and hearts and stars and one thing or another to open up the heart. And they're all sincere in their own way. But as tiddlywinks, as far as we're concerned, Because the bottom line, folks, for the freeing of the soul is being able to go back through the pain that has been suppressed that keeps a person from living a life of sanity. The suppressed pain that a person has blocks the activity of the heart being the major organ of the body, the major endocrine of the body, the fear that we go through and so on. All of this is tied into the heart chakra. Fear of pain, fear of being hurt, fear of hurting. And until we can get that pain out, we're locked in. And I want you to put away the silly children's games that are so rampant out there in what they call holistic health. And get down to the business of determining what is going to free the soul from these self-imposed fetters of resistances that we have created for ourselves. Now, Ian, is there anything you want to say about that, sir? Let me put it to you this way. After your finger was fixed, and after you went through all that burning, searing pain, bottom line, how did you feel in your heart toward your past relationships where your heart was blocked off in relative to them? This is getting very personal, but I'm sure for a teaching mode here that this will be very important for all of us to profit from.
Well, one of the things that I needed to work on personally was my my sensitive side. In fact, I wrote it on my list. I've resisted doing the list for a number of years. I learnt about it in 1993 in Byron Bay. I did it for about, wrote a small list, had about 30 things on it, got most of them done and threw the list away. Thought I'd done it. That's my list done. Right, what's next? And I've been drawing my list. Well, I've been in class here, actually, because I found from day one, every time something's talked about, I wrote it down on my list when it came up for me. And so now I've got about 60 things on my list so far, and I've been doing it in class. Not a huge note taker, but I think I took the important notes. And my sensitive side, I have been having a bit of a problem with my study of the martial arts because it teaches you to suppress pain. Those of you that remember I got up and talked about you get pain and you shut it down. In fact, you get so well trained at it that you don't even know you're shutting it down. It's just such an automatic response because when you're training or sparring or fighting with someone, you get hit and you can't go, ouch, that hurt. Because as soon as you show a sign of weakness or as soon as you bend there, it opens the other person up to take advantage of that. So you need to become very, very yang and very, very hard and have this armor here. And because of that, I had an inability to grasp a lot of feeling. I did Reiki 2 here with Janine, and people are running around, or after Reiki 1, I'm sitting in the circle there watching, and I'll draw myself to things that are sensitive. I didn't do Reiki 1 because I'd done it before, and we had the big circle here, and I walked in and held hands with everyone because I know that that's part of what I need to go through. That's part of what I need to feel. And after Reiki 2, Janine said, everyone's running around saying, I felt all this neat energy, and she said to me, how was it? I said, didn't feel a thing. And people are in here talking about, I can feel this and this energy you've got, and I'm going, what are they talking about? Because I've made myself so hard. And this is an area that I've needed to do some work on. And as John said, I've had crystals put on my heart, and I've had people say to me, this will open up the heart chakra, and I've had crystals set all over my body. And, you'll get this amazing thing, and I get up and go, oh, yeah, that was interesting. So what happened the last couple of days is I went through a lot of my grieving, my emotionality from my 2 major relationships that I had in my life. I got some very clear understanding of mistakes that I made in the first one, which as you sow, so shall thee reap, and it created exactly the opposite situation in my second relationship. And that became very, very clear to me that what I resisted in the first one created itself in the second one, and the opposite happened to me. So that was a very powerful understanding as well. So I'm on the path now to opening up. My heart felt more opened up when I was lying there on the table, and Esther had a couple of words to me yesterday, which I appreciate. I'm going to go home and make some changes. But yeah, I feel a lot more open in the heart, and it was the most severe pain I've ever had, and obviously that was necessary for me to have that opening up. So, yeah, hopefully next year I'll be able to come in here, and when people are talking about it, I go, wow, look at all this freaky energy you can feel.
John Critchley, where are you? I see a hand. Would you bring the body with it? Now, John, we've been working how many years? About 3 years, 2.5? And John's been working night and day, at least day, during the days mostly, but being kept up at night with a tremendous amount of pain that he's been suffering of for some time. Now, it's been a long time, and I'd like to have John give you a running report as to what's been happening, because he also has had a massive heart condition, and he has also gone through tremendous heart pain. And John, would you like to share and bring an update as to what happened the other day and what's continuing on right now, and let people be aware of some of the extenuating circumstances that comes around as we work primarily on the heart and its related areas. And John, just tell it as it is. You are now the instructor from your experience.
Well, not quite sure where to start, but as John said, my life has been pretty well controlled by pain for the last 5 years, almost non-stop, day and night.
Day and night.
Yeah, even oftentimes just to sit there and have a meal. I mean, I've got to sit there and wait for the pain to go before I could eat. And up probably every hour at night, sometimes all night. But I've always thought that to hell with the doctors, I'll sit there and wear this out. There's been a night or two I've said to the good Lord, why don't we get this over and done with? I'll get me out of here. But he must have decided I need to be around here for a while.
Haven't learned your lesson yet.
Yep. So anyway, having been, we've sort of held points a long time and haven't had a great lot of reaction till we got up here, and I certainly had a couple of great reactions here, which I'm grateful for. Unlike Ian, I'm afraid at this stage of the game I wasn't quite able to get through all that pain, but we had some good reactions. And from since we've had the cranial, it's sort of like, I guess you could call it like a percolator bubbling away. It's getting better every day. I'm getting less pain. It's still there occasionally, but it's not as bad as it was by any means. And funny little things keep happening all day. You just sit there and you get a sudden burning that's got nothing to do with your heart. You get pain somewhere that's got nothing to do with your heart. And as I said to Rex yesterday, I think that when you've had a lot of pain, you concentrate on getting rid of that. That's all you can think about. You know, I've got to get rid of this pain. And maybe, you know, what you've got to really do is let all the little things happen, and let all the little bolts, nuts and screws get tightened up, and then when you're ready, you can put the big spanner on the big nut and give it a real good screw, and then it'll all be tightened up and it'll be fine. That's about where I am at the moment. I'm just getting the little nuts and bolts tightened up, and the big one's tightening up by itself. Thank
John, what happened the other day from here down to here?
Oh yeah, for about on and off for about 3 hours. It was just like trembling from here to here, all the way down. It's still going on.
Show how the shaking was.
It's just gentle shaking like that. And still not over yet, but we're pressing on.
But what happened to the pain when you went through that experience?
The pain went temporarily. It still comes back occasionally, but we're still, you know, that's an ongoing thing, or appears to be at the moment.
But what's been happening with your sleep at night?
I'm sleeping well at the moment, yeah. That's great too. The other night I slept for 11 hours and I haven't done that for a long, long time.
Thank you, John. And this is just getting better all the time, and we're grateful for that. Now, this again is oftentimes we want to have that magic bullet to take care of everything right now. You know, we have that certain amount of impatience. This is where patience and perseverance is paying off. And we're getting down to where we're getting changes in the sclera of the eye, definite changes there, where this big blotch indicating the massive damage to the heart, that's beginning to clear up quite dramatically. John, wouldn't you say that, sir? About 20% of what it was, and that's about right. And we had a real massive damage to the heart, and so that's beginning to clear up very, very nicely. We've had the heart surgery that go along with it, you know, the whole gamut of what you can do to treat a condition. And this is starting to come right. And this is where patience and perseverance, and these are two things that you have to work with people, because people want the magic bullet, they want it right now. It doesn't quite happen that way. It's taken us a long time to get in the condition that we're in. It's going to take a continued effort to get back through that. And this is what we need to teach our students, because our students often, they listen to a tape or two and they think they're going to have miracles right off. Some do. Most of them don't. And most of it's just going to be, for myself and for Doug, it's just been hard sweat and tears to make some continual progress, perhaps because we're more resistant than the average person. But that's the way it is. So, John, thank you very, very much.
I would like to underline what Ian said with pain. Quick pain, full pain is a quicker result. I only have to think of my last experience with Summer. He started with full speed, full pain from the start. I was willing to take it. I'm able to take pain. I'm adjusted to the pain. And the result was, with 1.5 hours, we had done all we had to do. And it is so logic. I have to go through all that in case I would like to have a result. So it's why should I stretch the time of suffering when I can do that in a shorter time? I have to suffer in any case. I have to go through. So I adjusted, and I was very grateful. He did it his way, and it helped me. I had just to suffer for 1.5 hours, and my knee was done. When I'm thinking of the operation I had, I don't know how long the operation was, but I remember quite well the time thereafter. I had excruciating pain thereafter for a very long time, for days and days. And then all the time with the plaster came all these unpleasant things. And when I remember to take the plaster off when they are doing that with their chainsaw, I nearly die every time they are doing that. Through all that, I had just to go through 1.5 hours of pain. And that was just brilliant. And that's the best thing. You surrender, you adjust yourself to the pain, you surrender, and that's the easiest thing in the world. When you are saying, when people are saying, take off, take off, take off, they are stretching the time of their own suffering. It's not of their benefit. I know people not all have the ability to stand pain. I can stand pain because I have had a lot of pain in my life, of any kind. But I only can underline what Ian said.
I also want to add something concerning pain. The harder the pain is, basically the easier it is to surrender. You haven't got much time to think about it. It's so bad, you might as well surrender. But I mean, if you suffer for quite a long time, you just go on and off, well, I can take it, I can't take it, and it's just a long process. And we are here to get over it all, and we might as well do it as quickly as possible.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I'd like to back that lot up because Jenny did my back for me last night. Now, I didn't realise it, but this back has been out for 50 years because as she started on my back, I had a picture of how I put it out. The whole gamut of picking up a wardrobe and carrying it up 4 flights of stairs and taking it the distance from about Block A to the end of Block B. And I could see it. I could see every bit of it. But when she first started, I got this shearing pain right in the back of my spine. And I tensed up, my fists clenched up, my legs clenched up and everything, and I said to myself, no, forget it, release it, accept it. And I forced myself to unlock my hands, unlock my legs, and as soon as I did that, the pain went. I said, okay, Jenny, move it up a bit. She hit another spot, and so we went right from there, right up to there. And she just went right up. How long did it take, Jenny? A couple of hours at the most. And I've had this darn thing for 50 years. But in a couple of hours, because I accepted it, and willingly accepted it, and made myself accept it, forced myself, literally, to relax, it went. So, stick with it.
Duncan, would you like just to bow your head down to the class and let everyone look at the color of your hair?
Yes, I got a nice haircut last night. The only trouble was she was cutting off all the grey pieces. She wasn't cutting off the dark pieces. She did a very good job.
Duncan, stand up straight for a moment here. Oh, my goodness. Well done.
Where I've got my fingers here now, there was a lump like that. It ain't there anymore.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Brooke, would you come up here, Brooke? Now, I see you've been on time here today, and I appreciate that. I will watch very carefully, and maybe about a year or two I may acknowledge it.
Take it off your list.
Now, I've got my eye on you. Okay. Now, one of the things that we're dealing with here is deep pain. And I'm going to talk about the principle now. And then I want Brooke to take what happened as a way of looking. Now, pardon me for getting into your space here. Correct me if I'm in error in any way. But oftentimes when we're young and we experience severe beatings, which we suppress, at the same time wanting to destroy the opposition, then later on we have into our temperament that every time we have pain of any kind, what do we want to do? We want to strike out. And this is where when children are raised in homes where there's a lot of abuse, not Brooke's case, of course, but a lot of abuse on the street. But when children are raised in homes where there's a lot of abuse, then how do they act toward their children later on when they grow up? Tremendous abuse. And this is one of the things that the counselors recognize, that most child abusers, from a physical, painful beating standpoint, most of those parents come from abused homes themselves. And so we need to break that chain. In body electronics, we have the way of breaking that chain, because I'd like to have Brooke now, as an instructor, tell you what he experienced yesterday under the very able elbow of John Sears.
You got one of those. Yesterday, John held his elbow on my lower back. I got a couple of areas there. The last time I got up and talked about experience of another part of my body burning, there was still some lower back pain there, which hung around for a few days, so I figured we'll get into the lower back. And John's really good. He gets in there and he just pushes away and he doesn't move. He keeps the pressure on really well. So I just intensified the pain to the point where, like Ian was saying, I've never felt pain like that before in my life. All through this course this year, the pain, the stages of pain, or the intensity of it has increased with each point holding that I've had. It's just gotten deeper and deeper and deeper and more intense. And each time I thought, wow, I've never had pain like that before in my life. But thinking about it now, I guess I have. It's just kind of compounded into one small period of time. Because what I found was I was going through different experiences, seeming like from one to the other, and then all at once, and all at the same time, and the pain that's sort of locked into that area. There's more pain there, at the same time as before, you've suppressed it anyway. Like Ian was saying, I had the ability to just switch the pain off very, very quickly, and it becomes automatic after a while. I was, done a little bit of martial arts, but also before that, I've been in situations where it's been necessary, to sort of in some instances to survive. So after a while, it becomes pretty automatic. So here's John, just with his elbow digging in my lower back, and I got several memories. One in particular where I was, kind of being kicked around and kneed around a lot in that area, and there was I got a lot of burning in that area, so I just tried to surrender to it and just try to let it, allow myself to go through it. And I just kept calling on my God presence and just, kept asking that I was able to, to go through what I needed to go through. And of course the pain got more and more intense, and the burning got more, hotter and hotter. And before, like a lot of the times, I've been able to keep my body really, really still, and just go through it and wouldn't flinch, wouldn't move an inch. And this time the pain was so much I couldn't do it. There was times where I was sort of moving around. But that didn't stop. The pain didn't stop. The burning didn't stop. It just kept getting more and more intense. I remember thinking that, like last year when I did the course last year up here, I remember thinking, this pain's, it's no sweat. I've had tougher pain than this before. I've had more pain than this before, and I've handled that no problem at all. But the difference is before that you just suppress it basically automatically, so that you think you've had the pain, but then it's gone. But in this instance, you're intensifying it. You're wanting it to happen. You're allowing it to intensify, and it just gets more and more intense. I just think of some of the people that have been through different reconstructions in their bodies, and some of the levels of pain that they must have endured. I think about the story that John and Doug have talked about the one gentleman who was on one guy's back for like a couple of days with just supplement and pee breaks, in between, and going through dissolving metal straps and solidification of the spine, and getting up with a new back. I think of the level of pain that you have to go through to do that. It's really intense. Some of the word patterns that I went through were a few of you may have heard me screaming a little. I've in the past, gone at sort of intensified the word pattern within myself as well before, and thought I was doing it, And I've talked to John and Doug about this before, about where you can intensify, where first initially you need to vent or express the word patterns and the anger and the emotions in order to help intensify the whole situation, so that then you're able to encompass it or control it and go within, and you may not have to voice it. But I thought I'd I thought I was doing that, you know. I thought I can do that. But it's not the same. You really need to get out and intensify the word pattern and put all the emotion right into it.
Brooke, stop right there. Go back and re-emphasize clearly what you now know for yourself. Re-emphasize that again, because as instructors, we all have to understand this eventually.
Well, initially last year, there was a point where because I was being very observant of how Doug would facilitate and how John would facilitate and the sort of things they would say to people and just the different situations of people's injuries or their illnesses, and I was just trying to get together in my mind so that I could go back and apply that in the best way possible, because there's so many variables. You know, everybody's different. Everybody can handle this, and some people can't handle that. And the one word pattern will work good, and for one person, and one area or method of facilitation will work good for another, and not for somebody else. So there was all these kind of variables I was trying to get together in my mind, so that I could help people the best way I could. And one of the areas was this, people venting. And because you hear about like rebirthing and other different forms that I don't know much about rebirthing, but I do know people that have done it, and those same people have been doing body electronics, so I've talked to them about it, and how you would vent everything and all the emotions and yell and scream about. You feel really great, that's all said and done, but a few days later, those things come back again, and you feel the same way you did before. So this point of venting, as in yelling or screaming or intensifying the word patterns on the table, as compared to, internalizing it or encompassing and controlling it, but still, the intensity's still there. The emotion's still as strong, if not stronger. And I was trying to figure out where I was at within understanding that. What was I doing? Was I at a point where I was really unconscious and unable to encompass the pain or intensify the pain by going over the word patterns inside my mind, just going over and over it. At the same time, having a memory or several memories of different times where those word patterns are relative, and intensifying the emotions that go with it. So I was trying to figure out where I was at there, and throughout the year, and especially this year, I've realised that lying there really still is very important, and going over the word patterns in your mind is very important. But the next level, it seems to me, is you really need to vent those word patterns. You really need to yell them out and scream them out. Because it gets the anger out of there. I don't have a problem getting up to pain or anger level. I seem to be able to, get up there and I have a lot of anger in me, I guess, and a lot of suppressed anger and pain, which if you looked at the sclera lines in my eyes, you'd find that out. So that's a really important lesson for me, is to be able to do that. I'm sort of, I can get up here and talk, and I can yell and scream and make funny comments down the back of the class and have some fun in the seminar, but when it gets to the table, I've had a real problem with yelling out word patterns, everything, and letting everybody know.
Tape change.
Letting everybody know how I feel.